This is Bars Loaded with Ben and Nick,
a strength, powerlifting, and performance podcast
where we hope to share our opinions, help educate and inspire,
tell a few stories, build a community along the way, and
Bars Loaded. And welcome back to Bars Loaded podcast with Ben and Nick, your two favorite autistic powerlifting commentators on the internet. How are you, Ben?
I'm good, man. How are you?
Good. Can you respond to me right now?
I can.
Okay, that's better. I thought there was a delay on the audio, but you were just taken a little bit taken back by the autistic title.
There was that, but then it froze for probably like 2 or 3 seconds on my end. I'm like, have you finished your introduction, or like, what are you doing?
That just came to me. That just came to me straight off the top of the dome
from the tism.
I just got like a little spark, and I was like, "That's it. I'm gonna roll with it."
The real introduction for you tonight is I'm rizzed, I'm tizzed, and I'm ready to
go. Yeah, exactly. I did want to start the podcast before everyone tunes out and gets really bored with how in depth we go into warm-ups, with mentioning that we are running the Bars Loaded Strength Symposium on the 20th of April at Apex Strength in Thornton, New South Wales. Not to be confused with Apex Strength in Melbourne, which a lot of people were slightly confused about. So I do want to make the distinction that it's actually Apex Strength in Thornton, New South Wales. Ben is flying up here to do our first one. So everyone that's in New South Wales, this one is specifically for you. We have a few tickets left at the early bird price. So use at checkout, use the code earlybird, and you'll have a discount applied to your cart. 9 a.m. to 4 p.m, no lunch break. We're just hammering through with the information. Bring your lunch. You can eat. We just won't be stopping for you to do so. So you'll be eating while we're still talking. Squat, bench, deadlift, periodization, programming. I've added warm-ups to the list, which I think is a really good way to kind of lead into the movements themselves. We have M presenting on performance nutrition, fueling the strength athlete. And then we have an open floor for Q&A also. So if you don't leave that day with an absolute fuck ton more knowledge than what you came with, I'll personally refund you 100% of the ticket price. You won't be disappointed. Yeah. You won't be disappointed, man.
No, you won't.
I mean, we're building out the handbook that you guys will be getting at the moment to follow along with the slides. All of the slides will be given to you in a printed book that you can follow along, and then obviously take that book home with you for future reference as well. And the stuff that's in there's pretty good, if I do say so myself. I'm actually really proud of it. So it's going to be good.
It'll be very good.
Yeah. So if you haven't yet registered and you're interested in coming, do so now so that you don't have to pay full price. It's worth the full price, but if you can get it for the discount, even better. Okay, that's enough of that. How's your week been, buddy?
It's been good, man. Like, it's been, again, like another one of those weeks where it's a little bit chaotic, and it's just sort of like riding the wave of that and like just trying to really go with it, but also trying to have some controls in place to not get like washed out.
Yeah,
so, yeah, it's good.
Well, talk me through the chaos.
So one of the girls I coach, she does like business coaching as well. Mm-hmm. And with a few of the projects that I've got lined up for this year, I was like, I need help, like figuring out a bunch of the back end shit of that. I'm like, that's just not a strong suit for me, as you would know.
Mm-hmm.
So her and I are doing a bit of work together over the next couple of months to sort of like get all that stuff like really churn in the background so that I can actually launch these things that I have coming up and make them as successful as possible.
Nice. That's really
Yeah.
exciting.
Yeah. So that'll be interesting, but it'll be really, really cool.
Have you done much time in the gym yet?
So I had a bunch of like face-to-face stuff at the end of last week as well. So that's sort of like another reason as to why the week was a little bit hectic. So like, again, new gym in a commercial gym, it's a lot of like new members that have signed up like early January, even in Feb. And like part of the stuff that they get there is like free sessions with a coach. So
Yep.
the way that I'm just trying to like work through them as quickly as I can so that I'm not like doing weeks and weeks and weeks worth of free shit.
Yep. So you got given a stack. You got given a stack of those when you started?
Yeah. So I'm just trying to like get face to face with as many of them as possible, get through the sessions as quickly as I can, while obviously like providing a high level of service, and then trying to convert them in. But it's an interesting crowd because they're all quite new to gyms. Like they've either like, you know, only been going to the gym for like maybe a year. They've been doing it by themselves. They don't really know what they're doing, or they've literally like never been to a gym before.
Yeah.
So it's like, it's a really interesting demographic. And even just like, obviously I haven't really been in a Gen Pop gym ever. Like I've never worked in, you know, one of these like 24/7 big box gyms. And to me, it's like I hear some of the language that the people use. I'm like, how are people still using this language?
Yeah.
Like the amount of people that come in there, like, oh, I just want to tone.
Oh, no.
And I'm like, I'm like, really? I'm like, how do we not know that this is like reframed to like body composition now? Like, and again, like, that is the interesting part. So like, there was like one lady in particular that I had a sit down with on Saturday. She's like 47 years old. She's this like really lovely, like Chinese woman. She's, I think like 4'10", maybe 4'9". So she's tiny and she weighs 41.7 kilos.
Oof.
And she's like, I'm going to Greece later this year. I want to look fucking banging in a bikini. Like that's literally, she's like, I want to look sexy in a bikini. I'm like, fuck yeah, let's go. But she's like, I don't want to get big and bulky. And I'm like, you're 41 kilos. Like you're not going to get big and bulky.
Big and bulky to you is like 50 kilos.
Yeah. But like, I think it's really interesting for me to have to navigate that side of things after more than a decade of never really having to deal with that side of things. So it's interesting for me to sort of have to like, I mean, it's interesting, but it's also really fun of like being able to educate people as to like what it actually means to tone up. But yeah, so that's been like interesting.
Well, you know what's really funny is the gym that we've been training at it's in this spot, and so most of the gyms that I've trained at in recent years have been in industrial areas.
Mm-hmm.
So you kind of like, it's one or two gyms in that industrial area and it's kind of surrounded by businesses. This gym that I'm training at now isn't in an industrial area. It kind of is, but it's not actually an industrial area. It's kind of half industrial, very much residential, but it's only 2 streets back from the main street in a fairly busy part of Newcastle.
Yeah.
So it's a little bit of a mix of everything. And no word of a lie, we drive up the main street, we come to a set of traffic lights, we turn left off the main street, we drive up that road about 100 meters, we turn right at a roundabout, we drive down that road about 50 meters, and we're at our gym. So within that drive of 150 meters from the main road, there's 7 different fitness facilities.
Mm-hmm.
Between private personal training studios, there's 3 of them. And then there's like 4 CrossFit gyms, or 3 CrossFit gyms, and our gym.
Yeah.
And there's 3 of them that are actually in the same building.
Mm-hmm.
4, our gym, a boxing gym, a CrossFit gym, and another CrossFit. When I say CrossFit, it's like those functional fitness, CrossFit fitness, strength and conditioning kind of style gyms with like a big rig, some boxes, some kettlebells, and that's about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so 4 different shop fronts that have gyms inside them in the one building. And one of them is called Tone Lab. So that's one of the functional fitness CrossFit gyms is called Tone Lab. And I actually only noticed it this very morning. Drove past and I was like, what? That's another gym right there. And there was all females in there. There's probably 20 females in there training at 5 o'clock this morning. And then we drove back around the front to drive home. And then I was like, oh, look, Tone Lab, that must be it. So it's obviously targeted directly at that demographic. But that's I mean, to answer your question, that's exactly why that term's still around, because
people are still using it.
People are using it to trap people.
Yeah. So it's been interesting to like go through the process of trying to explain what toning actually means from my end of it, and then trying to convey it in a way to them where it's like, hey, this is what you're asking for. So yeah, that's been interesting. I went to IMAX on Saturday afternoon, which was really cool.
Yep.
What'd you see there? So it's a documentary called Big Sky. It's about the James Webb telescope that they send out into space.
Okay. That's interesting.
I think they launched it, I think it was like 2021, and it's going to go to, I think going like 1 million miles away from Earth. And apparently from there, it should be able to see to pretty much like the start of the universe.
Damn, how long is it going to take to get there?
About that long. I don't know, man.
Didn't they tell you in the documentary? Or were you not paying attention?
I may have like zoned a little bit. I was like...
You're a fucking idiot, man. You go and watch a half-an-hour documentary, you can't even remember the most vital part.
You could say I'm a bit of a space cadet.
Like, I want to know if I'm going to see photos of the end of the world or if it's going to be beyond my lifetime.
I mean, like, they showed us, like, images and stuff that they've gotten. But, like, I'm sitting there and I'm just like, they don't actually know what the fuck they're looking at. Like, they're just making shit up.
Yeah, so that telescope has taken photos and then they're like random shit.
Yeah, so like they take these images and they're like, oh, this is what we think we're looking at. I'm like, you have no idea what we're looking at.
No.
Like you might sit there and go, oh, well, we're pretty sure that this is it, but you have no way of actually confirming what the fuck we're looking at.
No, fuck no.
But
that's fucking cool though. That so I watched June.
Yeah.
Finally on the weekend.
Happy June 2 week, because it comes out this week.
Yeah. I'm not going to see it on the weekend. Em hated it.
Oh, dude, you have to divorce her. I'm sorry.
I knew that she would. That's why we haven't watched it, because
it's her or me.
Yeah. She hates those types of movies. Like she just, anything that is too unrealistic, she's like, well, that's not real. I'm like, yeah, well, that's what's cool about it. Is that you just like reading a book, but you're watching it.
Yeah.
Because she likes reading books that aren't real.
Well, I mean, there's literally books of June. Like June is a series.
June is a book. Yeah. So we were watching that, and the coolest part about it, I think, for me, was the whole time I just kept saying to Em, this could be real. Like you're sitting there saying this is unrealistic because to us it is unrealistic. But what if this is actually happening on other universes, and we're just over here like, duh, that doesn't happen. And then they're over there doing yeah, and then they're over there doing like cool June shit with like fucking like dragonfly escape pod helicopters and shit, and they're like, oh, fuck those Earthlings. They don't even know what's going on. We'll just leave them alone and do our own shit. Like it could happen.
Well, I mean, when you think of how many visible stars we can see in like our galaxy or whatever the fuck it is, and then how many universes or galaxies that they've been able to pick up with other telescopes, it's much of a higher likelihood than not that there's other civilizations that exist elsewhere. It's just more so a matter of like whether we can detect them or not.
Oh yeah, I always say I think would be super naive to think that we're the only life form. Yeah.
Dude, this is going to quickly become like an alien podcast.
Well, I actually think that aliens live on Earth.
Have you seen the president of the US?
Yeah, he's not an alien.
He's a lizard person.
Yeah, much more lizard than person.
Yeah.
I actually think that there's aliens on Earth, and we just don't know it yet.
You mean Elon Musk?
Yeah,
I think it's pretty clear that he's not from Earth.
Yeah, people like that. I wouldn't be surprised if they were.
Yeah. Oh, the other thing that I look at is I'm like, when you look at some of the deep sea fish that we have here, it's like, how the fuck are you going to tell me that those things aren't alien? And then you look at the fact that so much of our oceans are unexplored. It's like, are you going to tell me that we don't have things that are in the areas that we haven't explored, and that, you know, after however many years of like industrialized civilization where we've, you know, supposedly been to outer space, that we haven't gone into these areas of the ocean, and that if you're going to tell me that 70% of the oceans are unexplored, that there's probably not some shit there that can potentially, I mean, whether they're potentially stuck down there or we're stuck up here, and there's just like that barrier in between where it's like, you can't access. Oh, dude, that is a wild rabbit hole I could go down.
I know, I love it. You know how I put it out there about doing the separate podcast? I had some feedback that we should.
Except we would have to do every episode on like acid or like mushrooms.
Yeah.
Obviously.
Duh.
Duh.
Probably not good for my health.
No.
I think I might be the healthiest I've ever been in my adult life at the moment.
I literally said to you the other day, I'm like, this is probably like the like healthiest and like happiest I reckon I've seen you in the time I've known you.
Yeah, well, I think it's probably the healthiest and happiest I've been in my entire adult life, to be honest. Yeah, it was funny. We were having this conversation this weekend with someone at the comp that we're at, and you know, like Em being so into nutrition and so on top of all of that. I'm just the complete opposite. To where, like, obviously, I know that it's important, and I know enough to get by, and I know what I should do. I just have never done it up until now. I have in like bursts, but like when I met Em, I was eating frozen party pies and frozen sausage rolls for dinner 7 nights a week.
Bro.
I had no utensils, no plates, and no cooking utensils in my apartment. I had a microwave because that's all I needed to do the party pies and the sausage rolls. And on the weekends, as like my weekend treat, I would get the full size 4 and 20 pies and cook them in the oven, and it'd be like a big treat.
Oh, Nick.
Yeah, so now actually being on top of my nutrition and hydration and not so much sleep. I'm not sleeping a lot of hours, but the sleep that I get's the best quality that it's ever been. So yeah, things looking up.
It's good, man.
Yeah, feeling very skinny though.
Yeah. Yeah.
You're supposed to say, "Oh, you're not skinny, bro. You're still jacked."
Yeah.
Fuck off.
You're like, fuck you. No, as I said to you the other day, like you're looking more athletic at the moment versus when I met you properly like 10, 11 months ago.
Mm-hmm.
And you would walk from the office to the gym floor and you were like a different shade of purple. And I'm like, bro.
Yeah, I was prep Nick.
Yeah, but
I was purple prep Nick.
come on.
I was purple prep Nick. I went a little bit overboard, all right? Here's one thing that anyone that knows me well knows and will attest to, that I don't do things by halves. Like it's all or nothing.
Yeah.
So I don't do things by halves. I don't do things in half measures. I'm either all in or I'm all out.
It's a good way to be, though.
Yeah, it is, but it's also, I think probably now for the first time in my life, I'm learning to control that a little bit. Mm-hmm. So I think being all in and being all out has its benefits, but I also think it has its drawbacks.
Absolutely, as everything does.
Yeah, so I think now what you're kind of seeing when you say like you're the healthiest and you're the happiest, etc., I think is me just learning to control the all in and all out a little bit and understand that it's okay to be half in on some things and all in on other things, and then you kind of get the benefits of all of them.
Mm-hmm.
And less of the negatives associated with being 100% all in.
Yeah.
So, but I am going all in on other areas and then just being a little bit more well-rounded with my approach to all things physical, I guess.
Yeah.
It's going well. How's your training going?
Yeah, it's going all right. I had bench today. I had a double at 147, which I put my belt on a little bit too tight and it fucked me a little bit, but we got it done.
Mm-hmm.
And then I had my last and press after that where I had 3 sets of 4 at 135.
Mm-hmm.
So like some good, moderately intense, just pure pressing movements, which was cool.
Mm-hmm.
And then just like heaps of accessories just to make sure that things are still moving well and feeling good and all that juicy shit.
Did you do that chest supported row machine? The T-bar row?
I did.
You loving that?
I am. Like I have it twice in my program. I have one with like neutral grip handles for like 6 to 8 reps. And then I have on a secondary day where it's a wider pronated grip for like 12 to 15.
Mm-hmm. Nice.
And I, for a couple of weeks, I'd sort of just been doing it with like just raw grip, no straps, just to build some like grip capacity. But I was like, I know I'm being limited a little bit by that.
Mm-hmm.
So then today I'm like, fuck it, I'm going to put some straps on. So
how'd that feel?
Yeah, really good.
You did that today?
Like,
nice.
So like I've used, like it's weird. So using this machine, I did like sets of 8 with like say 8, like 4 blues on the end. So I was like 80 kilos.
Mm-hmm.
If I look at what I've done, like single arm row on the hammer strength plate loaded rows, I've done 100 kilos per arm there.
Oof. Oh, and that with the seated chest supported isolateral row.
Yeah, but like
Yeah.
I've done them standing rather than seated, kind of using the
Mm-hmm.
seat as like a hip blocker.
Mm-hmm.
And I can chuck 520s aside and like thrash that out. Whereas with
Mm-hmm.
this chest supported like bilateral row, I'm like, oh, it's like 80 kilos is heavy.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's like obviously like the difference of like positions and angles,
Yep.
but that's
That's got
also
a
why,
really. That's also got a really long lever
yeah,
as well, which makes that weight feel a lot heavier. That's part of the reason why I love those machines.
yeah. So I mean, like it was nice to put straps on today and be like, oh well, I'll give it a bit of a feel out, sort of see how we go. But yeah, definitely want to sort of build some really good capacity there over the next couple of weeks.
The best I've ever done on that was on a hammer strength version of that machine,
Mm-hmm.
which was at World Gym, and I did it with straps on the pronated wider grip,
Mm-hmm.
and it was really awkward because one of the rubber handles was off it, so I was grabbing like metal on one side and rubber rubber on the other side. It's part of the
Yeah.
reason why I used the straps, but also because I couldn't grip it. And I did 5.5 plates for a set of 12
Yeah, nice.
and that was like a full scap protraction at the bottom and then all the way up at the top, every single rep.
Beautiful.
It was, I only ever did it once. It
Yeah.
was beautiful though. That was
Like
right
that.
before I transitioned over to back to more of a powerlifting style training and haven't done them since. And now I don't have
Life.
access. Yeah, I don't have access to that machine anymore.
Sad days.
Very sad days. What are you training for the rest of the week?
I've got deads on Wednesday. I've got another upper body session on Friday, and then I've got squats on Saturday.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. Are you going to do any sessions at the gym that you're training at, or are you going to keep going back to the gym that you're?
See, I'm kind of a little bit torn. I love training at my gym because, like, obviously incredibly spoilt for choice of like machines and facilities and all that sort of stuff. But I also feel like it would probably be helpful to sort of get my name around the gym a little bit more to kind of be able to showcase what I can do.
Mm-hmm.
Like as obviously like, you start there, you have to do like the trainer profile and all that kind of crap. And part of it is like, oh, like what's your 2024 training goals? So I've put up the numbers that they're my goals. And I literally had like one of the trainers come up to me on Friday. And he's like, are you serious with those goals? I'm like, yeah. He's like, bro. He's like, that would break me. I'm like, I know. But I'm like, I could coach you so it doesn't.
Perfect.
And he had a bit of a laugh about that. But yeah. So like part of me is kind of going, I might start doing some stuff there just as a bit of a, yeah, like I'm going to show off a little bit,
Yeah,
but
it's also
for good
a
reason.
really, yeah, and it's also a really good way to start conversations in the gym as well because it's less formal than if you're walking up with your uniform on.
Yeah.
Or your not your uniform, but you know what I mean, like your trainer shirt. If you're just kind of on the floor training, I've always found that to be a really nice icebreaker to where you can just in between your sets take your headphones off and say hello to a few people, and then they'll be like, "Oh, are you Ben from up on the wall?" Like, yeah, and then it just really it's like a nice flow. I wouldn't obviously. I wouldn't be doing like the serious sessions there because it will interrupt the actual session itself. But just as an icebreaker to be on the floor, I've always found it works really well.
Yeah. And that's where I was kind of thinking, I'm like, I might be able to do, like, I can probably do my squat sessions there. I can probably do like my secondary bench session there. And that might just be like a nice, easy way to kind of just start to sort of,
Be seen.
yeah.
Yep.
Because
Be
again, like
seen and be recognised.
yeah, and then for people to go, oh well, if this is what he's doing with his training, like maybe he does know a thing or two about a thing or two.
Yeah, and it opens up questions as well because people might be like, "Oh, I wonder why he's doing that," or "I wonder," and then if you then spark up a conversation, it gives them the opportunity to ask you, and then it gives you
Yeah,
the opportunity in return to answer those questions.
yeah,
So I've always found that it's kind of the reason why it's so hard to train at the gym that you work at because that is and always has been one of the best ways to break the ice and start conversations. And then, but once you then do that, that then becomes the expectation, or like you set the standard that that's then okay to do. And then in 6 months' time, when your books are full and you don't really need to be doing that as much, that's kind of the expectation and the standard that you've set. So then that becomes okay. And you're like, no, but I just want to train now and get this
yeah.
stuff done because I've got 4 clients this afternoon back to back. And it's like,
And that's probably where I would just start training at my other gym,
yeah,
and I would just go, you know what, like, cool, like I'm literally only here to coach my clients, and then I leave and I go train somewhere else, so I don't get stuck talking to people. I mean, even at the gym that I train at now, like I still get stuck talking to people, which again I don't mind, but there are days when it's like I go in, like I will walk in with my headphones on, I keep my head down, I walk through to the bench or to the rack or to wherever I'm training for the day. I put my bag in and I just get into it. And those are usually the days where people can kind of, pick up and go, okay, he's not in a super talkative mood today, and I'll just let him do his thing.
yeah,
And it might be like I walk past and I just go like, just sort of give him the old nod, be like, yep, cool, like I see you, I acknowledge you, but I'm not engaging.
yeah. And I think I mean, it's necessary to have those days, right? But the issue then becomes is if that's the gym that you work at, that then can start to affect your business
Yeah.
because people will get a perception that, you're not nice or you're not friendly or you're arrogant or whatever, when in reality you're just trying to get your shit done so that you can move on to the next task.
Yeah.
So I've always found it best to kind of separate where possible. But again, I've always found it best to train in the early stages to get known. So it's kind of like this catch-22.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anything else cool from the week or the weekend? Any
Yeah, I mean, like
standout?
there's some stuff on Saturday, but I don't know if I'm going to talk about that publicly yet. I think obviously you know what I'm probably referring to in terms of what it is, but I think that's something I'm just going to sort of keep under wraps for a little while longer until I kind of figure out where to go with it and how to talk about it properly. But
Yeah, 100%. I will just
yeah,
say though, fuck man, you're a hippie.
yeah, no shit.
Holy fuck, man. Like,
It was
do
nice,
you
man.
know? Do you know that there's these things? It's 2024, and there's these things. There's a whole industry called construction, and
Okay,
the purpose of that industry is to build structures for
okay,
humans to be inside, so that they're not in
okay,
the elements.
okay.
I'm not sure that you're aware of that, so I thought I would point it out.
Oh, thank you.
You're welcome. It's really nice to be inside a structure and not in the elements.
Yes, I like being outside, man.
Do you? You're an outside guy?
I'm an outside, but also because like I run hot, like
Yeah,
being in the
mate.
park at night when like most people are like, oh, it's cold. I'm like, I'm so comfortable right now. Like,
Oh, don't get me wrong. I've got aircon and temperature control in my structure.
yeah, it's like there's this other thing called air conditioning.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm
Yeah,
just not an outside person.
yeah, I like the outdoors, but I like it a lot more if I can be like around a fire and like
Yeah.
that sort of stuff. But
Yeah,
I'm
that's
like,
nice.
like obviously went and saw the movie, went out for dinner, and then like which we just laid in the park for a couple of hours, and it was just nice.
Yeah, it is nice. Very romantic. Very nice. But yeah, I Em's family is very outdoors.
Yep.
Both like her mum and her dad and her sister and her sister's long-term boyfriend, and I'm just the odd one out, and I'm like, nope, I don't want to go for a walk after breakfast. Nope, I'm gonna go and lay down, and I'll see you guys when you come back.
Yeah.
And I'm like, no, I don't want to be. If I can be inside, I want to be inside. I don't like the sun. I don't like the wind. I don't like the noise. I just want to be in my blue cave with my aircon on, and I'm happy. And
Each to their own, man.
Em goes out every morning, goes for a walk, and I'm like, if you see something really cool out there, like in the world, just like take a photo and show me when you get back. I'll look at it on the screen from the safety of my room. But yeah, I mean, I do like a fire, like a campfire, but then it's like then your clothes smell like campfire forever as well. So
which is like the greatest smell in the world.
But if you like that smell, if you like that smell, have you smelt the cologne from the makeup shop that smells like campfire?
Can't say I frequent makeup shops, Nick.
Really? With
No.
that complexion?
I know, right? It's El Natural.
Oh, so surprising. No, there's a makeup shop. It's a really popular one. What's it called? They have like big shop fronts in all of the big malls. What's it called? Like all the girls like it. Mecca? Yeah, maybe it might be Mecca, something like that. Anyway, one of those big makeup shops have a cologne section, and they have a cologne in there. It's unisex, but it legit smells like campfire.
Nice.
Shout out Dwayne. Remember Dwayne?
Yeah.
Yeah, he used to wear it. I'm like, bro, have you been camping? He's like, no, this is called campfire.
Nice.
I was like, yeah, it really actually smells like campfire. It's nice.
Nice.
Dwayne had a baby.
Did he really?
Yeah.
Congratulations, Dwayne. That's exciting.
Yeah. Dwayne's a real daddy now.
I think I remember seeing him post something about it on his Insta a while ago.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. He's a real daddy. So he's taken a little bit of time off training.
Nice.
Recently, just probably for the most part of this year so far, really. He's kind of like dabbled here and there, but nothing structured and nothing serious at all, just with like adjusting to life with a newborn and what that looks like in juggling, all of other life's commitments along with looking after a human life is quite challenging, obviously. So he's just reached out to me this week actually, and he's ready to come back and get ready to start looking at APL Nationals.
Fuck yeah.
Which is mid-year, so plenty of time to get back into it and build into something nice.
Yeah.
He's also, I think another like spurring factor is he's looking at Nathan's numbers.
A bit of healthy competition there.
Yeah, because they compete in the same weight class in the same federation, and they're both my clients, and they both train kind of primarily out of the same gym as well. But it's like, Dwayne was always a fair way ahead, and he was always pretty much the strongest guy in that gym as well.
Yeah,
other than me. So then now, not so much, because Nathan's numbers as of last week are very close. And he's got his last heavies this week and then comp in a few weeks. So he's in a good position where he might give Dwayne's numbers a little bit of a nudge.
It's good.
So I think that's going to be good for both of them.
Nice. So on a bit of a side note as well, I do just want to acknowledge, obviously, like with the Q&A that I did last week, someone made a comment about my bookshelf not having any books on it.
Yeah, we took care of it.
Problem
Ben's got a book.
solved. Fuck
Ben
yeah.
has a book. I love that was an anonymous question too.
Well, the funny thing is the person who actually sent it messaged, or like they spoke to me about it, and they're like, oh, that was actually me who asked, but like if you responded like negatively, I wasn't going to tell you who I was, but because you were so good at, because they don't really know me that well, but they're like, oh, because you were like good about it, like I'll come up and let you know that it was me. I'm like, it's fine. But I'm like, yes, there is now a book.
There's a book there. One book. We were contemplating moving it, but I kind of like it.
It adds character.
Yeah. It's a little bit chaotic, just like Ben's existence.
Me. Exactly.
Yeah.
Same.
If you were a cartoon character, who do you think you would be?
What sort of cartoon character were we talking? Are we talking like a Looney Tune character or like...
I know who you would be. Who do you think you would be?
I would either say like Taz.
That's who I was thinking.
Or like the giant chicken is like
Oh, that's who I had for me.
Oh yeah.
Foghorn Leghorn.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's who I had for me.
Yeah, but I would probably say like Taz. Just like
Taz.
Hairy and like chaotic.
Yeah. Who do you reckon I would be?
I'm trying to think of like my fucking Looney Tunes, man. Yeah, I'd probably go like the chicken.
Yeah. I reckon Foghorn's pretty accurate.
Yeah.
He's a great character though. They're both, Taz and Foghorn are elite.
They're great characters.
I'm still a huge fan of Looney Tunes, to be honest.
I'll admit it is one of the things where if I'm sitting there going like I need to have a bit of a zone out, I'll quite often just like YouTube some Looney Tunes stuff, and it's really soothing for me. Yeah,
it's fun, huh? What's your favourite cartoon of all time?
Dragon Ball Z.
Is it?
Fuck yeah.
Mine's The Simpsons.
So, because I mean, like, I grew up. So if I'm talking like nostalgic, I think like Dragon Ball Z would be my favorite one because I literally grew up on that as a kid. That was like really something I watched all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And then like I quite like some of the really like non-PC like adult animated shows like F is for Family.
Like, I haven't seen that.
Oh, dude, you would fucking love it. It's on Netflix.
Yeah, it's good.
Bill Burr voices the main character in it.
Yeah, he's
and it's
great.
like a family that grows up in like the 70s over in the States. It's fucking hilarious, dude.
Okay.
I think you'd really fucking like it. I don't know if Em would like it as much, but
she loves The Simpsons.
What does she think of like Family Guy and South Park?
Oh, she likes South Park.
Okay, well, she might like this then.
Yeah. I don't think she's really watched a whole lot of Family Guy, but she likes South Park.
I just love how like out there Family Guy and South Park tend to go with some things.
Oh yeah.
And I'm like, did they just make a fucking joke about that?
Yeah, I love it, and they get away with it.
Yeah, so I like animated stuff that like just pushes the boundaries of like what you can and can't make jokes about.
Mm-hmm.
And I think like F is for Family. It's it's the cliche like like Family in the 70s where like the dad like has like severe anger management issues. And fantastic, yeah. What's your favorite cartoon?
I'd probably say The Simpsons.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just think it never gets old. Like, Em and I were watching some clips last night of just old Simpsons, and we were just on the lounge pissing ourselves laughing.
Mm.
And there's not many shows that you could watch that many times, and it's just still incredibly funny to where you're like actually laughing out loud as an adult.
Yeah.
And I think the Simpsons definitely do that for me. They're fucking hilarious, man.
Mm.
I really like The Simpsons. I really, like old school. I like Biker Mice from Mars.
Yeah.
That was great. Um, I watched a lot of Dragon Ball Z. I watched a lot of Pokemon.
Mm-hmm.
I did watch Looney Tunes. I watched the Jetsons. All of those I thought were great. South Park, I watched that pretty religiously for a long time. King of the Hill,
Such an underrated show.
I really like that one too.
Yeah.
That's pretty funny. They're probably Beavis and Butthead.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that one a lot. And
I'm the great Cornholio.
Angry Beavers was a great one.
Fuck yeah. Did
Angry
you ever watch
Beavers.
Johnny Bravo?
Yeah, Johnny Bravo was funny.
That would get cancelled so fast today, though.
Ren and Stimpy. That was
Yep.
fucking awesome when we were growing up.
Yep.
Because that was pretty out there too.
It was very out there.
That's pretty out there for now. Like, I don't know. I don't think that'd last long these days.
No.
The cartoon that is Us, Pinky and the Brain.
Yep.
That was a
Very
good one.
good. That is a very good one. I haven't watched that, I reckon, since I was like 10.
I just don't feel like they make cartoons as good as what they used to.
This is how we know that we're getting old. We're like, they don't make things as good as they used to back in our day.
Like, look at all of the great animated shows that I just rattled off.
And what do they have now?
What do they have now? I don't even know. Do they have anything good now?
No. Like, I would say that the only good animated shows that come out now are done by like people that would have made the shows, or they're making like adult animated shows that are like I mean, for example, have you watched Big Mouth on Netflix?
No. Is that good?
Oh, yeah, so it's about these kids that go through puberty when they're in like middle school over in the States, and they all get these hormone monsters. And it is probably one of the most like sexually explicit shows that like isn't inappropriate for it to be around like kids.
Oh, so they like mask it?
No, so like each kid has like their own hormone monster that only they can see.
Yeah, but they mask the adult jokes so that it's appropriate for kids and only adults get it?
No, like so it's for adults.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
Yeah, but as in like if you were making a sexually explicit show about children, like
okay, yeah.
They do it in a way where it's like it doesn't feel inappropriate, like it's just fucking hilarious.
Gotcha.
And then they've got like a spin-off series called like Human Resources as well. It's just so fucking funny.
Yeah, I might have to watch that. Actually, one of the ones that I do like it's not a cartoon though, it's an animated movie, is the Despicable Me series.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm a pretty big fan. I mean, Toy Story's the OG, and I'm a pretty big fan of Toy Story, but I think Despicable Me I probably like a little bit more.
Yeah. So like I'm a massive like Disney and Pixar fan.
Okay.
Like I could watch like if I'm like ever like unwell to the point where I'm like, you know what, like I can't get out of bed today, like, or I'm on the couch all day. Almost, I would probably say 80% of the time, my first point of like I'm going to watch a movie is from like a Disney or Pixar collection.
What are some of your favorites?
So, I would probably say like I don't think you can really go wrong with some of the original Disney movies like Aladdin, Tarzan, those movies there. As far as like Pixar movie goes, I actually really enjoy some of the newer ones. Like there's one called Soul in particular, where this guy, again, like it's got to do with his soul. It's like it's jazz music, like animated movie.
Yeah,
because I love jazz music as well. Like there's some really beautiful parts of it where I'm like, oh, like this is
nice.
Really like it's just nice to watch.
Yeah,
and like again, because I'm a big emotional softie as well at the best of times. I think any of those like feel good movies where you're like, oh God, this makes me feel the things. I'm like, yeah, let's go.
Yeah, there's a few good ones. I like Despicable Me. There's the one about the is it just called Pets? That's
I think
pretty
it's
good.
like a day in the life of pets or something like that.
Yeah, that one's pretty good.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah, Despicable Me is great. They're bringing out a new one.
A fourth.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. What's it?
Yeah.
What's it meant to be about?
I don't know. They've just kind of released posters for it.
Okay.
So it's just like they haven't done trailers or anything yet. It's just announced via posters. So we know that it's happening, but we don't know anything really else about it as far as I know. I'm pretty pumped about that though, because Gru and the Minions, such good characters.
Yeah.
Like that dynamic is fucking awesome.
It's so fucking good.
Yeah. Cool. My training this week was, well, last week was okay. It was okay. It was, I progressed on everything, but I didn't kind of write myself a program last week. So I wanted to give myself just a couple of weeks of messing around in the new gym and just kind of seeing what was there and trying a few of the different machines to see what I liked and what I didn't like, because I didn't want to go and write a whole program and then jump on the machine and be like, I actually don't like how this feels. And then it's kind of annoying to do that. So I just kind of like had a little rough outline and then went in, and if I saw something I liked, I just did it. So that was fun for 1 week. And then the second week I was like, I'm kind of annoyed that I don't have a program to follow.
Yeah.
But I did some good work, but not as much as what I would have liked. And then because of the podcast issue last week, I was behind on kind of like where I wanted to be at work-wise midweek. So then instead of going in on Wednesday morning and doing the conditioning session, I skipped Wednesday morning to get up early to do some work that I missed out on Tuesday because of the re-recording of the podcast. So then what I've found is the less I move, the more my knee hurts. So then by Wednesday night, like all of my adductors on that left side were like really tight, which then was making my knee feel a bit shitty, making that hip feel a bit shitty. So then I was like, So then Thursday and Friday session were probably not as good as what they could have been, because it was more based around like just doing what I can do, not being a dickhead. But we got it done. This morning's session was really good though.
What'd you do?
I did the day one, my first lower body day. But like today was the first day that I went in with like an actual structured program.
Yep.
So I felt like I didn't have to think about anything. I just opened my app, everything was programmed in, and all I had to worry about was going for it. And it worked out beautifully. So I did my little warm-up sequence that I've been doing. I only had to do one set today because everything felt really nice, which straight away put me in a great mood, because I was driving to the gym feeling like it probably wasn't going to be the best session because I'd been at the comp all day yesterday.
Yep.
And side note, while I was at the comp yesterday, for the first time in I can't even remember how long, I was able to stand with my lifter on the side of the platform, do all the side of the platform coaching stuff, send them onto the platform, quickly hustle around to kind of in between the side and front judge, and just get there and drop down on staying on my feet, but drop down into like a sort of half kneeling position, but on both feet. Like, you know the position I'm talking about?
Yep.
With no pain.
Fuck yeah, man. That's sick.
So I was having my right foot as the one that I kind of like sit back on. And then my left knee, which is my bad one, was kind of like the forward foot. But I was able to get all the way down and sit onto that right ankle, right heel. And I did that all day for all lifts.
That's awesome, dude.
Yeah. And I just kind of did it. And then I was like, holy fuck, like I'm on the ground here. This is, I haven't done this in probably like 6 years.
Yeah.
So then I did that all day. So I kind of was driving to the gym this morning and I was like, oh, yesterday was a pretty big day. And I did a lot of like running off the platform, getting down into those positions that I'm not used to. So things might not feel that good today. And then I did one set of my little warm-up kind of run through, which we're going to talk about later.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, fuck, I actually feel great. I'm just going to do my first set of walking lunges.
Sick.
And yeah, I loaded them up. Like I did 38 kilos in each hand.
Mm-hmm.
Did a nice set for my top set. And that felt great. And then I did a back down set. And then I went over to that hip press machine. The best top set on that I've ever done. That was this morning. And I nearly threw up after that set.
Delightful.
I'll tell you, no, it was good. Back down set was even worse.
As it should be.
And then after that, I did dumbbell RDLs.
Delightful.
And I really wanted to do the 90s to beat you.
Yep.
But I just didn't have it in me today.
See, our dumbbells only go up to 80s.
Well, I have hundreds.
Well, I've done 200 for 15 before, so...
Barbell?
Yeah.
I haven't done it for 15. Damn it. How many did you do on the 80s last week?
Like 8. But that was like, I went...
Damn it.
I went 32s to 50s, and then I did the 60s, the 70s, the 80s for like sets of like 8. Just like in ramping sets. But even like getting to the 80s, I was like, that didn't really feel that hard.
Yeah.
But I'm like...
I'll send you the video after this because I didn't send it because I thought you did way more than me. But I did I did 7 with the 80s today, and the only reason I stopped is because it slipped out of my hand. And I had straps on, but it still slipped down. I was like, damn it, I could have done a few more. But yeah, that was my top set, which was pretty decent. It was an extra rep than last week.
Well, I mean, that's always a good sign. But you know that contraption that I sent you that's got like the dumbbell like racks that like you can actually stand and unrack? I'm going to use that this week because the hardest part about the 80s was getting the fuckers off the rack.
Yeah, and getting them kind of like in a position where you're comfortable.
Yeah. So I'm kind of like, if I can get them on that this week, I would like, and obviously kind of knowing where I can actually get up to now, I'm like, I'm going to try and push for like 12 to 15 reps.
Yeah, I think you probably could.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like if I can safety bar good morning 200 for 10, I should be able to fucking RDL the 80s for like 12 to 15.
It's just awkward, which is what I like about them when they get really heavy like that.
Yeah. Because what I really like about it is how much my back has to work to kind of like stabilize my arm as I'm hinging. Like, I really like that part.
Same.
Like, I don't feel like it's as hard with a barbell, obviously, because it's, one instrument, both arms are fixed to it, whereas it's individual arms with, 80 kilos per hand. There's a good amount of weight there that kind of has to be stabilized. Yeah,
and it kind of, because of how big and cumbersome the dumbbells are when they get that heavy as well, they kind of like hit your legs and they move around a little bit, so it's not as nice and controlled as say like a barbell RDL. I love it. So like the 80s, getting them off the rack and then taking a step back was like it's awkward because they're so big. And then I did a rep and I was like, nah, I need my feet closer because like the dumbbells are just like fucking slamming into my legs. So then I had to like adjust where my feet were, and that's what I think ended up fucking my grip in the end.
Yeah, probably.
Comp yesterday went really well.
Yep. How many lifters did you have?
I had two.
Yep.
It was just a small. It was kind of like the first female only comp that we ran out of the gym that I work at. So the goal is to really build this up over the next couple of years and introduce a lot more females into the sport.
Awesome.
Because obviously, having it is growing within that population, but I think the more that we can advocate and push that, the better. It's such a positive way of training for women. It's empowering. It teaches them to be strong and to focus on performance and not starve themselves and do like dumb fucking Jane Fonda workouts. And actually do something meaningful and get a nice adaptation from it. And there's obviously so many benefits that come along with that as well. And the community aspect of it is really good for them. I feel like a lot of other female sports really kind of pit them against each other, and that forms a lot of really unhealthy female relationships. And this is quite the opposite.
I feel like powerlifting does a really good job at like building a really tight knit community. Like, especially I think for me, like I see a lot of guys that, frankly, like they're head to head competition with each other, but you see them in like the warm up room, like joking and having a laugh with each other. Like there was a guy back when I was competing, like in the first couple of years, there was a guy that I used to compete against all the time. Every comp, it was always like usually he and I going head to head. And I remember like one comp in particular, like I think like I out squatted him. He'd kind of like benched around the same as what I did. I'm like going into deads, I was like, cool, like I think like 20 kilos in front, but he was opening 20 kilos heavier than me. And I was like, oh, this is gonna be close. And I had, I think, missed my third. So like I'd made my second, and that put me like 7 kilos in front. And then he was taking his third, which was like 10 kilos more than what he needed to pull. I'm like, dude, he was taking 300 for a third. I'm like, dude, just take like 295, 290, and you'll beat me. And he goes, dude, I don't care about beating you. He's like, I want to pull 300. I'm like, I know. But you're also here to win. So I'm like, cool. If you're going to do this, like, I'm still going to be the one on the side, like, cheering you on the fucking hardest. And, like, he got to, like he was always super fast off the ground and always just struggled at lockout. And he literally was, like, that far off locking out his deadlift. And we were just sitting there, like, oh, my God, like, is he going to get it? And then he dropped it. And he walks off, and I'm literally, like, the first one there waiting to give him a big hug. I'm like, dude, that was a fucking sick effort. But I don't feel like you get that in a whole lot of other sports.
No, you definitely don't. You definitely don't. And if you do, a lot of the time as well, it's almost frowned upon.
Yeah, it's like the opposition of the enemy. Like you don't engage with them. Like you see this in sports like basketball or like over in the States. I imagine people like football and stuff. Like you might grow up with someone and you might play in the same clubs and that sort of stuff, and you're good friends, and then you go off to like competitive schools, and it's like, oh, cool, you're now opposition. It's like we are friends off the field, but like on the field, like I am here to murder you.
Yeah, we're not friends anymore.
Yeah, like I remember growing up when I was playing basketball, like one of my best friends got put on another team, and all of a sudden we're just like cool, like I'm here to beat you. Like you're still my best friend, but like when we're playing, like I'm not gonna go easy on you because you're my friend. Like if anything, I'm gonna play harder against you.
Yeah,
because I'm gonna be really competitive here. But yeah, it's interesting to see how like powerlifting doesn't seem to create as many gaps when it comes to like competition within like each, like obviously like it's a competition at the end of the day, and I think everyone knows it's like, yeah, we're going there to like, you know, to win. But I think it's really nice to sort of see people engage with each other and just have a little bit more fun with it. Like for example,
Yeah,
I love seeing Joe at comps because Joe knows when to fucking turn it on, and he knows when to have a bit of a laugh and like fuck around out the back when he kind of has to. And I think
yeah,
seeing that's really nice. Like I always look back at the comps that I've done, and it's the ones where I'm like, I'm trying to take it really seriously, and I'm like, you know, fuck talking to anyone. Like I'm here to focus. They're the comps I've always kind of like never really done the best in.
yeah.
Whereas I look at my best performance, and that was the comp where I was like, you know what, like I couldn't give two fucks about today. I almost didn't even go to that comp, but I literally just went in there. I'm like, yeah, I'm here to have a bit of fun. I get to lift with some friends, and I'll just take what's there on the day, and it ended up being like, yeah, one of the best meets I've had in ages.
Nice. Yeah, I agree, and it makes it more fun too.
Yeah, a little bit less pressure.
Powerlifting is definitely good for that. So I think more women in the sport is going to be just a net positive for anyone. And
Yeah.
it was a really good day. And then so I had two compete in that. One of the girls, Crystal, she just kind of competed in it as like her training lifts for the week. Just on comp day. She's prepping
Yep.
for nationals, and then this coming week, the week we're in now, is a deload week
Cool.
for her anyway. So I was like, yeah, you can just jump in and, you know, have a little bit of fun and do your last heavy lifts of the block at a comp. That's no problem.
Yeah.
And my other athlete, Joe, she kind of jumped in as well as not a last minute thing, but she's been kind of going through a body recomposition phase with Am. And so we were focusing on, you know, a few other aspects of training and training a little bit more like hypertrophy based for a while.
Yeah.
And then she's like, oh, I think I might want to do this. So we kind of transitioned and went straight into that. And she's a a small lady. I don't know exactly what she weighs, but she's like short, dude. Like she's like really short. So I don't think that she would weigh a whole lot. But I know that she's 5 kilos down from her previous comp. So on someone that size, 5 kilos is a fair bit.
Yeah.
And she did a 7.5 kilo bench PB,
Fuck yeah.
which is massive.
Especially when you're that much down.
Yeah. And she was 5 kilos down. She did a 95 kilo squat, which was 5 kilos heavier than her heaviest prep squat, which is nice. And only 5 kilos down on her previous comp squat at a lighter body weight. And then finished on 117 kilo deadlift as well, which is pretty cool.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And then, yeah, and Crystal smashed it as well. So both had a really good day. I got my coaching certification or qualification, whatever you would call it. I got signed off on that, which is cool.
Sweet.
And then did a little seminar afterwards as well. So it was kind of a big day.
It was a very big day.
And then I also helped out another lifter with wrapping her knees as well, which was interesting because her and Crystal were back to back on all of their squats.
That's always fun, isn't it?
That's the first time I've had that happen where their lifters are back to back like that. And
how did you manage?
It was fine. I mean, it wasn't hard. It was just like there was just a lot going on because it was like, okay, I'm going to wrap you. And while I'm wrapping you, I'm kind of giving you your pre-squat instructions. And then I timed it so that she wasn't standing around waiting for a long time on her own. So it was just a matter of like timing it so that I'm literally tying the wrap as they're saying bars loaded.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, you know what to do. Go for it. And then as soon as she stood up, Crystal slid along and I just started wrapping her straight away.
Yeah.
So
it's always fun when you have to get, but like finding the balance of like timing and stuff for that sort of stuff can be pretty challenging. But like once you kind of figure out like what to do, you're like, we can make this work.
Yeah, it's just doing the two things at once was what I found made it the easiest because you don't have time to wrap, stand up. Okay, let's put your belt on now. I'm going to talk you through what you need to do for this squat.
Yeah.
Feeling good. Take your breaths. Okay, go. It's like I'm talking to you while I'm wrapping.
Mm-hmm.
Now go. All right, next one.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was interesting. It was good. Very good. It was fun.
Happy days.
But yeah, that was the most hectic part of the day because it was the way it worked out is the side judge.
Mm-hmm.
He also had lifters that he needed to coach, and they were after my two lifters in the flight. Mm-hmm. So I wrapped. I had one lifter. Then there was a three person gap. Then I wrapped one, wrapped the next one, ran over to the table, put the next two attempts in, ran back, jumped in the judge's chair, judged 5 lifters, and then got back up for my first lifter and went through the process again.
Fuck, man, that's chaos.
So it was quite chaotic.
Mm.
But also kind of added to the fun.
Yeah.
And then, today uni started.
Nice. How's that?
Good. I mean,
you seem like you had to think about that one a little bit.
Yeah, so as you know, my eyesight's not the best.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm doing quite a bit of extra learning on the side as well. So I spent this morning, I did check-ins this morning, and then I did a couple of lectures that I needed to catch up on from the weekend because I was at the comp. And then had some lunch, and I was like, okay, I'll log into the uni and kind of see what that looks like because it all opened up today. I logged in, and then I was like, fuck, there's like my textbooks are on my computer. So and then I'm like, I'll read a couple of chapters before I record with Ben. So then I'm reading this anatomy textbook. I'm like 4 pages in. I'm like, I fucking got a headache from staring at my screen. This is how it's going to be for the next 4 years.
Yep.
Yeah. But yeah. So yeah, coffee helped.
Coffee always helps, man.
Helps with everything, doesn't it?
They're like, I had to amputate my arm. It's really sore. What do I do for it? It's like, just have some coffee. It'll be fine.
Have you tried coffee?
Yeah.
You and I spoke a bit about coffee over the weekend, and I think I'm going to convert to pour-overs.
Good.
I think you've won me over.
Good.
I've been a staunch long black fan for a while.
Don't get me wrong, like, pour over coffee isn't that different to a long black, realistically, in the scheme of things. Like, obviously, long black, you've got like your shot of coffee and then some hot water.
Mm-hmm.
With a pour over coffee, you just have the ground coffee, you just pour hot water through it, and it collects and brews, and you've got it there. The thing I like that's a little bit different is the texture is different.
Mm. Is it like thinner?
Yeah, so it comes out almost like the consistency of like a tea rather than like the thickness that kind of like that espresso has in it.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why like I really like pour over coffee because I'm like, it literally just feels like I'm drinking something lighter and it doesn't feel like it kind of sits as heavy, and for some reason, like if I have a long black, and then my stomach is like, it's time.
Yeah.
Whereas I can have like pour over coffee, and there's like a difference in terms of like how my body responds, and it's just like, we'll be back,
We'll do that.
and it just like it's good. I like it.
All right, I'm gonna try it.
Do
Plus,
it.
I think those like pour over like glass jugs are
These ones.
they're quite pretty.
I may have had one in our briefing.
A whole jug.
Close enough to like 320-ish mils.
Nice.
Nice.
Cool. Should we?
Get stuck into it.
Yeah, let's get stuck into. I think the people have heard enough about us.
No, that all we're going to give. We're not actually going to talk about warm-ups tonight. We're just going to talk shit for 3 hours.
We could.
Oh, we fucking could. Like, do not test us because we will.
I've got way more things that I could talk about that I haven't.
Oh, dude, so do I. Like, there's something that I was going to mention. In fact, I'm going to mention now. Like, I start pre-script level 2 tomorrow, which I'm really fucking excited about.
Yeah.
But guess which dingleberry got fucking confused with the international time zones? This guy.
This guy.
Yeah.
Are you going to do the level 1 lecture straight afterwards as well?
I have an hour in between them.
Yeah, okay, cool.
So
I'm
level
doing
1.
I'm doing. Go ahead.
So I was going to say the level 2 is from like 7:30 to 8:30, and then level 1's at 9:30.
It is at 9:30. Yeah, cool.
Isn't it?
Yeah, it is at 9:30.
Yeah.
Because I have a uni lecture from 8 till 9.
Yeah. So I'm kind of thinking, I'm like, I'll do level 2, and then I'll kind of have like an hour to do like emails and shit like that while I'm at work. So I've got to go into work. I've got a session, then I've got pre-script, then I've got an hour break, I've got pre-script, I've got another session, and I think another session after that. But I'm like, I want to be able to do the level 2 and kind of consolidate what we go over in that hour window where it's like, cool, I'm going to like refine some of my notes that I've taken and then get myself ready so that I can then focus for level 1 as well. I think, like, fortunately for me, like, because I have done level 1 before, like, I'm not sitting there going, oh, fuck, I have to study and remember all this content. It's like, no, like, I've got the certification. Like, I'm just refreshing.
Yeah, I'm really enjoying it a lot.
It's good.
It's good. All right. Well, speaking of refreshing, I think the conversation that we're about to have on warm-ups will be quite refreshing for a lot of people because I feel like it might help people perform better. Might help people prepare a little bit better, and it might help people kind of expedite the process towards them just kind of getting towards the stuff that really matters in their training session. Instead of spending so long rolling around the floor doing things that they may not necessarily need to do, which I guess is one of the kind of the main things that you and I both look for in a warm-up is it expedient and does it kind of get us ready in the most efficient way possible? Would you agree? Yeah.
Yeah.
Speaking of efficient, why say 2 words when you can say 1?
Exactly. You're welcome.
Cool. So did you kind of want to just kick us off with, and then we'll just kind of roll from there?
Cool. Where do you want me to start? We're going to go through the shoulder stuff?
Or we'll start at the top. I think so. If we start at the top, what we'll do is if we kind of give people a little bit of a rundown of what we might look for in a warm up from
Yep.
the top down,
Cool.
and then we might be able to give like a few of the exercises that we like for those things, explain those a little bit, and then we can kind of go through maybe some of the mistakes that we see quite often.
Yep.
And maybe present some better options.
Cool. So
and then that's going to be a bunch of information for people.
Yeah.
So I think if we tie it together at the end, and I think if you and I can just kind of give a few examples of maybe like warm-ups and build it out for people, but then giving the background might help them substitute things in and out as they need to.
Yeah. Cool. So obviously, I think for the main thing, obviously, if we are looking at, say, powerlifting or strength training as a whole, an area that we're going to focus on, frankly, for like most lifts, most of the time, is going to be a degree of like shoulder stuff. So I think in terms of what we were going to look at, obviously, we need to look at thoracic mobility. So we do need to look at like flexion, extension, rotation, and the ability to resist those to some extent as well, which we'll kind of go through a little bit more when we do talk about like core warm-ups. And then obviously a lot of stuff around shoulder in terms of like scapular movement, in terms of like different joints and where they sort of like play into the picture as a whole. So I think if we're kind of looking at some main ones, like we're probably going to look somewhere between like thoracic extension and degree of like shoulder rotation. Like they're going to be some really valuable points for us to start with. So I think for me, in terms of like thoracic extension, one of the drills in particular that I really like, and I know foam rollers get a little bit of bad press, but I think that there can be some good utilization of them depending on how and why and all that sort of shit. So I like doing whether it's on a foam roller, whether it's off a bench, obviously depending on how mobile someone is and where they're at and what they need. Doing like a pullover with a plate. So obviously if you're holding onto a plate here and then we're focusing on taking the shoulders up through flexion, really opening up through the lats, through the shoulders, opening up through thoracic extension. I really like that one there as a starting point. Again, if you're doing it off a foam roller, if you're really jacked up, it can be a really good way to be like, cool, like you have a definitive stop point there. You are kind of controlled within the range of the motion. You can't go too bonkers. And then as someone starts to open up, if they're doing it off a bench, they've got a little bit more access to range. And then we can kind of work with it from there.
Same thing. I love for thoracic extension using the laying over a foam roller. And a lot of the time, a lot of people need to just start with that. The positions that we put ourselves in, just with kind of the way life is at the moment, is everything is very much biased towards flexion. So I think that a lot of people have issues, not issues, but have a harder time with that entering extension. So a lot of the time just laying over a foam roller and not kind of compensating with a lot of lumbar extension to get over the foam roller, but actually doing it properly and getting that extension through the thoracic will be enough. But I do like the progression of using like a pullover. I think I also really like using like a broomstick press as well, which kind of gets the scaps moving a little bit while in a more extended position. I would also mention that a good progression for like a pullover with a plate could be from doing it onto a foam roller, doing it then on a decline bench, where you still have the constraint of the floor limiting your range of motion, but it's just a little bit more range of motion, and then maybe moving to a bench after that as well could be a good way of doing it. Also, I've had a bit of success personally, very, very much in the past, like 10 years ago, of actually arching over the foam roller on the bench press.
Okay.
Yeah, and then doing a few of the warm-up sets with just the bar, still with the foam roller under the thoracic, and really trying to drive the rib cage up and not compensate with the lumbar like I was saying, but like really kind of drive up that thoracic and get the extension through there over the foam roller, and trying to get to the point where you're not touching the foam roller while you're doing your warm-up sets.
Okay.
That was pretty nice. I haven't done that for a really long time, actually. I used to do that in America.
Nice. Anything else you want to add to that before we talk about like some rotation stuff?
No, I think we're both pretty much on the same page with that.
Yeah. Again, like a lot of the stuff we're going to talk about tonight, I think we're both on the same page for more or less the same of it all.
Yeah.
They're obviously like with the pullover there, like you like kind of like the broomstick, whereas I'm like I kind of prefer the pullover. Like there might be slight variations to them, but it's more or less the same sort of thing that we're going to talk about. So I think if we do move on to like thoracic rotation, I quite like thread the needles. And then obviously depending on where someone's at with thing, like progressing that into like an open the book, I feel like that can just be a nice way to like get someone a little bit more if they need it. Obviously, thread the needle is probably going to do the job for most people. But then there might be some that can benefit from, that progression of, obviously once you go through on the thread the needle, the other arm then just opens up and your arms kind of look like books and they just open up that way.
Yeah. So you're kind of like reaching back over, back behind you. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I quite like that a lot. I also would mention that doing thread the needles, which is something that I will program religiously in kind of like that movement prep section of the program, because I love them, is I like to program them with both reps and breaths.
Yeah.
So I'll do like 5 reps, but 5 breaths per rep.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah, I think that works really well because it gives someone like an actual rep target. Like you're going to do 5 repetitions here. It's a little bit dynamic. It's not just reaching through and holding. You are moving in and out of that position. But when you're moving into that position, I want you to hold it and I want you to take 5 deep breaths. And that deep breaths obviously then helping open things up there as well.
Cool. Anything else you want to add there? Or are you happy to move on to like some scap stuff?
Yeah, I want to move on to the scap stuff because although obviously like that thoracic extension and rotation is a pretty important part of the warm-up, I feel like the scaps is where the
magic happens. Yeah. So do you want to start off or do you want me to start off with what I like for some scap warm-up drills?
No, you can start off. I would mention just before you give like your favorite scap kind of movements, warm-ups, movement preps, is that a lot of the stuff that we're going to talk about is integrating the function of the scap kind of all together. The scapula does move in lots of different ways. So when we're talking about the scapula, we want to be able to do elevation, depression, protraction, retraction, upward and downward rotation, and a combination of all of those whenever required. It's important to note that the scap is kind of free-flowing on the back of your body and
should
moves,
be.
Hopefully, for most people.
Yeah.
And it just kind of moves as it needs to, right? So it doesn't just do one action. It most commonly does a combination of multiple and moves on a kind of axis. So when we're saying for this, we like this, it's majority of the time going to be doing a combination of multiple different things. So we're not going to do like 7 scap movements to warm up because we can do 2 that do 3 each, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So the first one that I really like is like serratus drills to kind of help work with like a bit of protraction, upward rotation. I think the thing that I do like to make as a caveat for this though is, again, it's not just the serratus, it's not just the scapula. There's like a degree of like active external rotation. So what I'd say a lot of the time that people do is they'll put their arm up on a wall like this. And this is usually where I stop people first. I'm like, no, I don't want you here. I want you here. By doing that, I have to protract my shoulder. If I'm here, I'm just in a nice lax position. It's not doing anything. And this is where I think if we are talking activation drills prior to a session, they need to be appropriate. So if I'm just here, I'm just going through range of motion, like I just feel my shoulder working, like it's like, yeah, cool, well, because you're not doing it right, and then it defeats the purpose of doing. So from here, I like to screw someone into like active external rotation here. I protract my scapula. All of a sudden, my serratus is already like under a degree of tension. From here, what I tend to cue is more, where does my elbow end up, which allows me to then focus on the degrees of shoulder flexion and where the humerus is moving rather than where my hand ends up. I feel like it's just an easy way for people to not get too concerned with what's going on up here, but more so what's going on here. So then it might
what's going on up there is going to be a byproduct of what's happening more proximally.
So if I can get someone in this position here, like most times people go, oh shit, that's really hard to hold that position. It's like, yeah, that's the point. And then from there, like you might have like a foam roll up against the wall, and then it's just moving up in the range where you can keep that wrist and elbow stacked and working in that. Now, for most people, that will be really, really hard. So as a kind of like regressed version of that, if you go like hand in behind the head like this, if you point the elbow forward, so again, kind of the same thing, but instead of being here, I'm just here. I put my hand there, and what I'm trying to think about doing is pushing on the angle of where my humerus is pointing. So from here, I would then go forward and through, back down, forward and through, and back down. And that can just sometimes be again, because the moment arm isn't as long and the mechanics are a little bit different, it takes some of the stress off the body and makes it a little bit more palpable if someone is struggling to feel their serratus.
Can you just keep going?
No, go.
Before we move on, can you just put your hand back on your head? And for everyone that's not watching on YouTube, I just want to give a audio representation of what Ben's doing. So he has his hand on the back of his head, like he's been told to put his hands behind his head and he's getting arrested. And his elbow's kind of pointing out. Now, where Ben's elbow is pointing out right now is probably, about 35, 40 degrees? Yep, to the side. And that's the position that he's in there. And then what he's saying that he wants you to do is put your hand on top of your elbow. Bring your elbow
in first.
More in front of you.
Yeah, so I'm now trying to point the elbow as far forward as I possibly can. And then just for some feedback, if my hand goes onto my elbow, I'm trying to push my elbow forward and into my hand.
Yep. So that bringing the elbow forward is an important part of that movement because that's protraction of the scapula, which is
correct,
coming forward and around your rib cage.
Yeah, which if we are able to effectively protract the scapula, then the serratus should be doing its job.
Yep. I just think that's an important note to make.
Yeah. And then I think for me, like if I can get someone who can effectively do a serratus wall slide, the progression that I like from that is a kettlebell bottoms under press. And the reason why I like the kettlebell bottoms under press versus just a standard shoulder press is the stability factors of it. So obviously when we think of the shoulder, like there's a degree of stability we need. So if we, hypothetically can do a bottoms under press with a 20, 24 kilo kettlebell, we're probably safe to assume that there's enough stability at that joint that we can then just go and trade something with load to get things doing their job even more. But if we are chasing stability, that's where I think a kettlebell bottoms under press is like the kind of king of the standards that we are looking for.
Yeah, I agree. I love that. I love that duo, Stratus wall slide done meaningfully and properly with a
Yeah.
kettlebell bottoms up press is beautiful. And for everyone listening at home, that would be doing 3 actions of the scapula
Yeah.
primarily, which is perfect. And then on the inverse side of those movements,
Do you want to go on that one first, or?
no, I'd just say like the inverse side of those movements would be the depression, retraction, and downward rotation. So if we're looking at that, what would you kind of look at?
So for me, I really like a dip hold. So obviously, like for the most part, I find it a little bit easier to do it off like the edge of the bench. So if I go like, fingers facing forward in like a pronated grip on the edge of the bench, if I'm sitting on it, what I'll eventually then do is like slide my bum off the bench away from my hand, so towards where my fingers are pointing, and that allows me to then like pull my shoulder blades back, depress them a little bit, downwardly rotate, and create like an isometric hold in between my scaps to actually start to facilitate a bit of awareness around like, okay, cool, like can I actually keep my scaps away from my ears and hold that in a nice, strong, and stable position? That's that's probably where I like to go with it.
Yep, I really like that one too. I would even go one step further and do the reverse dip, which is just the same, but let the shoulder blades come up towards the ear, keep the arm straight, and then retract back down into that position. Depress, retract, and downwardly rotate into that position. Hold that there, and then kind of let it come back out. So you're moving in and out of that position.
Yep.
I find that to be a really nice drill.
Yeah, nice.
And a lot more challenging than what you would think.
Yeah.
And then I love kettlebell windmills as well. Half kneeling.
Yep.
For the most part. If you can do them standing, fantastic. But I just find for most people, most of the time, especially powerlifters,
there's a limitation.
There's a lot of limitation there. So doing them half kneeling, if you can do them half kneeling, I'm stoked. If you can do them properly half kneeling, but kind of when you're doing the windmill, leaning or like bending into a little bit more frontal plane as well, I find works really nice. And if I have a powerlifter that can do that half kneeling without externally rotating the hip to make room, I'm super happy.
Yeah.
If they can just kind of stay really nice and neutral through the pelvis, kind of get that rotation through the thoracic and control the scapulas in a half kneeling position, I'm fucking stoked.
Magic.
For other athletes that aren't powerlifters and are a little bit more athletically inclined, standing is obviously a really nice progression from that.
Yeah.
But the chances of a powerlifter doing that are almost zero. So I wouldn't even try.
Yeah, that's fair.
And look, guys, this sounds like we're just throwing out a lot of just random fucking movements and words, and it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense at the moment. But I promise you, at the end, it'll make more sense. Yeah. So we're just kind of working from the bottom down. And I know this is a little bit more technical than just walking on a treadmill for 5 minutes and then doing some flappies, but we're getting there. There's a point to it.
There's method to the madness.
There's method to the madness, and we'll get there. So after we look at scaps, I'd probably look to external rotation next. What about you?
Yeah, that's probably where I'd go. Sort of like a mix of potential internal, maybe direct external and internal rotation. Yeah.
Yep. So
but most likely external.
Yeah. I feel like you're going to get a fair bit of internal rotation just through like the stuff anyway.
Yeah.
and to an extent external rotation as well, but I feel like potentially a little bit less. So if we're looking at directly training external rotation, I reckon you and I are going to be on the exact same
Bang on
page.
the money. Yeah. I,
Yeah.
I feel like most of the stuff we're going to talk about today, we're probably going to sit there and go, yeah, we're probably same here.
Yeah, which is why we're friends.
Exactly.
Imagine doing a podcast and being friends with someone that just had directly opposite opinions to you on everything.
Well, I feel
It'll probably be quite entertaining, but I feel like it'd be fucking frustrating as hell too.
I would. I don't think you'd be friends with them though,
No, I don't think so.
because you'd be like, "No, you're an idiot. You're wrong."
Yeah, I think you're wrong because I think the opposite of what you think.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that'd be quite funny. Yeah, so we're definitely gonna. So I'm gonna go with probably 90-degree external rotations, and my preference would be on a cable.
Yeah. I wouldn't ever do them as a 9-degree external rotation with anything other than a cable.
No, I've done external rotations with a dumbbell leg up on a bench.
Yeah, I think it's a little bit different when, like, with the relative humeral position. Because then if your elbow up here and you're still doing this, you're still training through a rotational plane there, and the tension is still relative to the rotator cuff. But it's just more so when the elbow is by the side and you're using dumbbells, the lines of force don't line up nicely with the rotator cuff.
They don't line up at all.
No,
And there's zero load through them.
exactly, which makes them redundant.
Yeah, absolutely. But we'll get to those because I see those a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, so external rotation, we're going 90-degree cables. Actually, it's probably pretty rare that I would actually program those though. So,
Yeah.
like we mentioned at the start, most of the things here we're kind of naming is how would we train these things in a degree of isolation, when in reality most of the time we're going to try and look to integrate these movements as much as possible so that we don't have to do 60 different isolation exercises in our warm-ups.
Despite some people telling you that's an efficient way to warm up.
It's definitely not.
It's not.
So with that in mind, I would probably lean more towards a face pull.
Yeah. Face pull, or potentially even like, again, if we're looking at potentially needing to try and access a little bit of internal rotation, I would maybe even look at like an upright row.
An upright row's an interesting one.
But I would probably be more inclined to look at like a cable, like rope face pull.
Yep. Yeah, I like those a lot. Because you're getting some scap stuff there too.
Yeah.
And I find as well with the cable face pulls, you can also cue that like a nice stacked position and start to reinforce that while other parts of your body are moving. And I find that helps transfer over really well to the kind of tougher part of the workouts as well.
Yeah. And I also feel like the face pull is one of those movements that gets done really poorly when people, again, I think the really important thing is like the intent behind the movement really needs to be outlined so that the execution can line up with that. Because if we are trying to cue someone into a more integrated like movement pattern of some external rotation, some scapular movement, if they're going into positions that doesn't allow them to access any external rotation of the shoulder, it's like, well, it's redundant. Like you may as well not have it there. But this is I think where like clear communication needs to be around, hey, look, we're doing this to help integrate some external rotation, some scapular movement. Like we need to be having this as a focus and not just going, I'm going to blast as much load on this as I can, and actually like working with weight that's relative to the outcome that you're trying to achieve so that you can facilitate that adaptation.
Yeah, or even just the exact opposite of that of I'm just going to kind of walk into the gym, I'm going to fuck around for half an hour and do my warm-ups while I'm checking Instagram, drinking my pre-workout, chit-chatting in between, and I'm not actually putting intent and driving these movements with any type of intent and getting any benefit from them at all. It's almost like, don't waste the time. If you're going to do this, if you're going to warm up and you're going to do it properly, there's outcomes that we want to get from it. So actually, give it the attention that it deserves.
Yeah.
Or just don't do it. Like, if you don't need to do it, don't do it at all. But if you do need to do it, then do it properly so that you actually get the desired outcome from it.
Exactly.
Because like we're going to talk about, you might not even need to do any of it. And if that's the case,
good luck.
Don't. But don't fuck around and pretend just for the sake of it.
Yeah.
So I think if we move off shoulders, I think that's pretty much covered, all of the movements in isolation that we'd kind of want to look at.
Yeah.
In the upper, and then we'd want to move as we're moving down. What would come next?
I would then look at hips. So again, I think there's like 3 main areas that we will touch on today, but for the sake of the process that we're going through, we'll sort of talk about hips now. So obviously, if we are looking at the hips, like one of the things that we need, especially with powerlifting and strength training, is access to hip extension. And I'm not talking like hip hyperextension. Like, I'm just talking like you should be able to stand tall and be able to utilize your glutes to bring the hips to a neutral position so that you're not constantly stuck in degrees of flexion. Again, I think it really depends on where someone is with their hip flexion as to what we're going to give them. Like if someone's, again, like I think for the most part, if we talk about like people that, they know how to lift and, they might be a little bit jacked up. There's 2 movements I would typically look at depending on where they kind of sit in terms of relative hip extension. One of them that I quite like is if you're laying prone, so like face down on the ground, you bend one leg at the knee so that like the heel of your foot is facing the roof. And then you literally just focus on contracting that glute to extend the hip. And you're just focusing on trying to work through relative active range of motion of that hip without engaging the lower back. And you're just going through that base level of contraction to get the hip firing. On the other side of that, and these 2 movements can actually be paired together quite nicely in like if you're going, hey, look, I really need to address some hip extension in this session. The other movement that I quite like is a front foot elevated split squat with the focus of trying to keep the rear leg as straight as possible within the means of mobility in terms of being able to create like loaded hip extension through that. It can be really uncomfortable for some people to hit those positions if they're like, oh, my hips, my quads are really jacked up. It's like, cool, you probably need this a lot then. If we are looking at the hip as a whole, one slight tweak to it that I quite like is that as you're going forward and down one of that like escalator style motion, the leg at the back, what you'll quite often see is if people are really jacked up through like their lateral hips, you'll see the knee start to kick away from the midline. So I quite like to sometimes bring the foot towards the midline. So to really stretch out the lateral hip as well as the front of the hip. Like if someone's hips are really jacked up, bringing them through that pattern of a split squat with a bias towards keeping that knee midline can be a brutally delicious way to really load those hip fibers up and get them opened up and stretched out in a way that's actually meaningful. And then if you then pair that with like a prone hip extension, that can be a really nice way to go, cool, we're going to really open up the front of the hip and then we're going to get the back of the hip doing its job properly, so but in a position where it's able to actually do it properly.
Yep, I love that. One of the other cues that I use a lot for that scenario as well would be the back foot to kick the heel out.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I feel like that really puts people in a nice position.
Rotation.
It's like bias internal rotation on the stance leg as well.
Yeah, nice.
Because you'll notice a lot of people really shy away from that a lot. So that's a really good way of doing it. If you kind of like looking and you notice that back leg, the heel's coming in, that probably means that you're shying away from internal rotation on the stance leg. And if you focus on pushing that heel out on the back leg, pushing more into internal rotation on the stance leg, which is a really nice way of doing that as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, I like the front foot elevated split squat. I use that quite a lot for hip extensions in warm up.
Like again,
I haven't done that prone leg, this prone single leg extension for a while, but I actually really like that too. That's a great idea.
Yeah, like I think again, like it kind of depends on where someone's at with
where you're at,
where they can actually access extension. But I feel like it's a really easy way. Like your leg may not actually come off the ground, but I think getting into a position where it's like, oh, cool, like I'm not engaging through my lower back, but I'm literally just contracting that glute and trying to get my femur moving. Again, I think the purpose that we're kind of looking at when it comes to warm-ups is going, this is where we are, this is where we're trying to get to. The intent of trying to get from here to here is what we're after. So if we are trying to teach people how to actually contract their glute in a meaningful way to help facilitate the hips being able to extend, I think putting ourselves in a position where it's like, cool, but there's almost no load going through that other than the weight of my leg. So obviously, there may be some people who's like, oh, their leg may weigh 80 kilos. They are an enormous human being. Their leg weighs a lot. That may not be an appropriate thing, but that's where, as coaches, like it is kind of our job to be able to go, where do you exist on this scale and where do I need to plot you so that I can give you the result that you're after?
Yeah, and I mean, it sounds like a crazy concept to be like, hey guys, we really want to have access and ability to create meaningful hip extension as powerlifters, but the amount of times that you and I see very high-level powerlifters not be able to do that and the effects that has on their lifting is astounding to me.
Yeah, and I think this is... I think you and I talk about this quite a lot, where it's like it's the ego of the powerlifter who like they always have to be in a comp prep, they always have to be trying to do heavy. And again, like don't get me wrong, like fuck, I'm guilty of this as well. I think we all are. Like we like to lift heavy weights, so like it's why we're involved with powerlifting.
Yeah,
but I think being able to actually, be a little bit mature as a lifter and really kind of assess where we are and what we actually need. Like sometimes taking 4 to 6 weeks to actually strip things apart and address issues that are actually preventing you from progressing long term. Because how often do you speak to someone, you're like, oh, how long do you want to be lifting for? And they're like, I want to be lifting until I'm old. It's like, cool.
Yeah, I love it. I want to do it forever.
Yeah, it's like, well, then why the fuck are you concerned about taking 6 weeks away from the shit that you need to? Because you're not progressing. Like you've been stuck doing the same shit, for months, for years, whatever it might be. It's like, take some time, like pivot, do the things that you need to do to unfuck the things that are holding you back, and then come back and see how you go.
Yeah. I mean, I spoke to you about this when I decided to do exactly that. And when I spoke to you, I also spoke to Josh from Nexus, and he's done exactly this, right? So he's just signed up with a new coach, and it's a coach that both you and I know, who's quite intelligent, great
Should we give
coach.
him a shout out?
Yeah, J Mac, shout
out James Mac.
I see you, dog.
Yeah, it's only the committed up in here, bitch. I got you, bro. Don't worry.
James got Josh not doing SBD at all for a block.
Yep.
And Josh said to me, he was like, yeah, man, I was like worried. Like when I signed up with him and he said like, this is what we're going to do. He was like, I questioned myself whether this was the right decision that I'd made. And, I was really skeptical because obviously one, that's what I like to do. And two, I was like, fuck, I don't want to not do that because what if I get worse at it?
Yeah.
And I'm not stopping being a powerlifter, which as soon as he stopped doing those things for 2 weeks, people were like, oh, you've given up powerlifting? Like, no, I haven't. But it was really interesting because during our chat that we had on this topic came up and he said like, I think it had been 5 weeks or 4 or 5 weeks when I spoke to him since he'd done any comp lifts at all.
Mm-hmm.
And he was like, it's fucking crazy, man. My knees that have hurt for the last 5 years have zero pain in them. All of my other lifts have gone up. He dropped like 4 kilos just in a reduction in inflammation.
Mm-hmm.
He was moving better. He was walking better. He was like, I didn't really notice it before, but when I was walking, I always kind of felt like I was going to fall over, like I was falling forward. And he was like, now my posture's just a fuckload better. My shoulders feel better. My hips feel better. My knees aren't hurting. And I think he was like 6 kilos down in 5 weeks. And he was stronger in all of his accessory movements.
Yeah.
And now he's come back to doing variations of squat, bench, and deadlift. And he's hitting PBs on all of them after, I think he had 6 weeks total off.
So I have an old client who's likely to be coming back to work with me in the next couple of weeks. And we were having a conversation the other night and he's like, oh, like, are there any movements that I should potentially be like, doing at the moment to kind of prepare for what we're going to be focusing on? I'm like, yeah, look, I can give you a list of the stuff that we're going to be doing, but like at the end of the day, how I'm going to give them to you are going to be very different to, I imagine, how you're going to do it on your own. But I'm like, get comfortable with things like front squats, get comfortable with things like a hack squat, get comfortable with things like a safety bar good morning, get used to like Larsen pressing and like almost like flat back pressing and a lot of dumbbell pressing and like bending forward with heavy shit either on your back or in your arms. Like I was pretty upfront with him. I was like, look, man, like we're not going to be doing comp spec stuff for a while because you need some time away from it. And, I have a very good feeling that when we apply this for 6-8 weeks, maybe even longer, depending on how things go, I have a very, very good feeling that when we do return him back to some competition styled stuff, that he's going to start to be able to, like achieve the things that I actually know that he's very much capable of achieving. Like the kid has a fucked up amount of potential, and I'm really excited for him to be able to actually step into it.
Yeah, I agree. And it comes back to literally these principles that we're talking about now in the warm-up, and these I hate the word warm-up, like movement prep, I guess. It's equally as shit of a term, but yeah, it's just training. But these kind of like core basic human movements that everyone should be able to do, I think, get a little bit lost in the weeds sometimes, and that really ends up affecting the top end strength more than what people would realize.
Agreed.
Cool. Fuck, tangent. Fuck, we're so fucking bad at that. That's all right. I think people like it. They've come to expect it.
Yeah. I think we set the tone early on.
Oh, fucking hell, man. I set the tone with that like 38 years ago. I've been tangenting my whole life. It's how my brain works. I don't think my brain knows straight lines.
No,
man. It's not how it works. Probably the last part of the hips would be internal rotation, which we touched on a little bit already with the...
But again, I think that was more from like an integrated version of it, whereas I think we can probably talk about some almost like isolated aspects of it. Yeah. Do you want to cover that one?
No, I mean, probably from an isolated standpoint, it would more just be gaining the ability to gain access to enough meaningful internal rotation that you could then load it in an integrated movement. So probably like a 90-90, like side-to-side knee drill. I don't really know the correct name for it.
I've actually got another one that I've thought of that we can add onto that. So if we're looking at it purely from an internal rotation position, what I've done before, which I actually quite like, is if you're lying on your side like you're in the recovery position, and you've got like a yoga block or like a foam roll or something like resting under the knee. And so you imagine like if my knee's on the ground here, my foot's on the ground here, knee would be up a little bit higher, foot's down here. then it's trying to then raise the foot off the ground as much to actually rotate. So imagine knees here, my hips back here. From here, I'm then trying to raise my foot off the ground to actually facilitate just pure internal rotation at the hip while you're in a flexed position that kind of mimics that squat. So we're trying to it's flexed internally rotated that we're trying to then facilitate access to. What I do like about that 90-90 one that you mentioned as well is we're able to load into internal rotation on one side and external rotation on the other side. So you're actually rotating both femurs and you kind of go in that rocking motion and you'll get a really good idea of what are my hips doing and how do they feel? I really like that one.
I actually like to integrate similar to what you just said is when you rock onto that side, I would go so 1, 2, 3, 4, so that you get to 10. On the 10th one, stay down in that position where both your ankle and your knees are on the ground, and then focus on lifting the back foot up.
Yeah, nice.
And that drives just a little bit more internal rotation on that side. And then go 10 more, land on the other side, and do 10 ankle lifts on that side.
Yeah.
I think that works really well as well, just to get a little bit more out of it. Another one that I just thought of as well that I have used quite a lot in the past and even fairly recently, I got from, what's his name on Instagram? He does all the old school strongman, range of strength.
Yeah.
Yeah, I got it from him, and it's actually quite nice, is in that half kneeling position, set a kettlebell up out to the side, and then you internally rotate the femur of the knee down leg so that your foot flares out to the side, and then kind of get it as far out as you can. Set the kettlebell up to there so that your foot's leaning against the kettlebell, and then drive back against the kettlebell.
Yeah.
That's a pretty nice drill as well because you're in hip extension in that position.
Yeah. There was one that I got shown a little while ago by Aaron Sim, who, for those who are familiar with Aaron, obviously will know that he was a phenomenal sumo deadlifter, had hip rotation of the gods. I remember one time he was down in Melbourne and I was squatting. I'm like, dude, my knees are so sore. And he was like, cool, I'll show you a stretch that I always do and it takes away a lot of my knee pain. And similar thing where if you go into a half kneeling stance and you block the back foot, you block the back foot from being able to rotate around. So it's going to help force internal rotation. So if your front foot's here, back foot's here, I then take that front foot around and I kind of think about numbers on a clock.
Yep.
And essentially what I'm trying to do is get that front foot as close to 3 o'clock as I can, which is obviously then going to take me into a ton of internal rotation of the leg that I'm kneeling on.
Yep.
And once you kind of get to a point where it's that's about as much as I can go, you then go into you shift forward and go into extension, internal rotation. And my God, that opens the hips
Juicy.
up like something else. And it is delicious.
Is that the guy?
The grasshopper.
Who he lifted in a gym, it was a green gym?
Yeah.
And he's like a cowboy now?
Yep. That's Aaron.
Dude, that guy's sumo is absurd.
So I'm pretty sure it was before Pro Raw one year. He pulled so I know there's a video of him pulling 360 for a double at 80 kilos body weight and he blacks out. But I'm pretty sure there's a video somewhere of him pulling 370 as well.
That is unbelievably strong, hey?
I'm pretty sure
his sumo is also a fucking meme.
He locks out below his knees.
It's like a one-inch range of motion.
Yeah. But again, the thing I love about it though is you would look at him and go, oh, he would be weak as absolute piss. And then you see him just get into a praying mantis position. And he's like, shh. He's like, and he pulled, I'm pretty sure he pulled 320 a couple of times Pro Raw in a 3-lift event. And I'm like, bro, you're so strong.
It's so wild, hey.
Yeah, but like he showed me, that like a really nice drill to like internally rotate, extend the hip, and that just like freed my hips up so nicely. I was like, oh, this is nice.
This is nice.
Yeah,
Cool. Yeah, I like that one too.
yeah,
Not in a position at the moment to try it, but hopefully one day I will be.
yeah. I would say no for you.
I have recently been able to get my knees and ankles back on the ground at the same time.
Oh, you saucy boy.
And well, I was able to do it, but I had to have my torso leaning over so far and like resting on the ground. But now I can do it and keep an upright torso with no support from my hands, which is a
Fucking
big
awesome.
step forward.
Yeah, but like you also showed me as well, like before we jump on, like how much like you can get your arms up overhead now versus what you were able to do like a couple of weeks ago, and it's hugely different.
It's wild, huh? Do you want to talk about that really quick before we go into the
Yeah, core stuff.
the last part, which would be the core stuff? So yeah, I mean, look, guys, everyone that's watching, I can put my arms over my head that way and that way, like literally look at my shoulders moving like crazy. I haven't been able to do that in how long?
As long as I've known you.
Oh, way longer, probably 5 or 6 years.
I was going to say, it's probably been years, realistically, since you've been able to do that.
Yeah, a long time. So, and it always had this pain, like, in my shoulder, right? Like, right here in the point of my shoulder. And so, for everyone out there that has pain in their shoulder and can't put their arm over their head, stop stretching your shoulder and doing dumbbell external rotations because it's probably not helping you.
And stop doing Flappy Birds.
Stop doing the big three. That's probably not helping you.
If you're like remotely strong, it's probably not that useful for you.
It's probably not that useful for you. It's probably not where the issue is most of the time. But yeah, so I worked on a bunch of this stuff that we're talking about now and just got my scaps moving, which then obviously pointed them up in the right direction, or allowed them to point up in the right direction to open up that glenohumeral joint and allow my arm to go over my head a lot more pain-free.
I think as well, like just to kind of address what we would need to require, or what we do require to get the arm up overhead, it's like 120 degrees thereabouts of shoulder flexion and then another 60 degrees of scapular upward rotation to help facilitate being able to get to here. What we see a lot with powerlifters, when we see a lot of restriction through the thoracic and we see everyone constantly retracted and depressed, the scapulas don't know how to move anymore. So I think we're again, correct me if I'm wrong, but talking about going through these motions that allow the scapula to move a little more freely, sometimes that can be the missing link to quote unquote like healthy shoulders, because we get taught so much. It's like, no, your scapulas have to be fixed. But realistically, from movement as a whole, like they should be able to move, as you mentioned a little bit earlier. But
they have to be able to move.
Yeah, and if they don't, that's when, quite often people are like, I get this pain in my shoulder here. It's like, yeah, because your scapulas aren't able to move the way that they should, and that's what we're trying to help you guys understand with all of this warm-up stuff. It's like, the objective here is to get you guys moving better.
Yeah. And moving better generally means let's start proximally, as in like closer to the body, and let's get that moving better. And let's then move distally from there, which means starting close, moving further out.
Yeah.
So let's like not look at the hands. Let's look at the scapulas, then look at the humerus, and then look at down the chain from there. And that's kind of how we want to frame things in a workable manner.
Yeah.
But yeah, I also find with the scaps, we are kind of taught to keep them locked and back and down so much, right? And I 100% agree in most circumstances, like that's going to create a better brace and a more stable, rigid overall system to complete our comp lifts. But I also find that when you're always stuck in that position, you actually lose the ability to create meaningful tension in that position. You're just kind of stuck there.
Mm-hmm.
So when you create the ability to protract, retract, upwardly, downwardly rotate, retract and depress at will,
Mm-hmm.
pain free, you can then retract and depress and hold it there properly with a good amount of tension instead of just kind of being jammed there without having to do anything.
Yeah.
And it kind of comes back to that argument of passive and active range of motion to a degree.
Yeah.
You know, we want to be actively creating this tension because then we have control over it.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing that we have to come back to is it's like it's active control. It's not just randomly and passively going through arbitrary ranges of motion thinking that we're obtaining the outcomes that we're trying to facilitate.
Cool. Let's move on to core.
Sweet.
So when we're looking at core, generally we're not talking about doing crunches, are we?
But how am I going to get my washboard abs?
Have you seen that thing recently about? Oh man, I can't remember who did it. It was something about like functional muscles and like muscles that look good or something. I can't remember what it was. I'll have to try and find it and send it to you. But it was someone saying like if you want your core to look a certain way, you have to train it this way because these muscles look good and these muscles work good and they're like different. So if you want it to work good, you have to do anti-rotation stuff. But if you want it to look good, you have to do flexion stuff.
Why do I have the feeling it's probably Stu that probably put that up as well? Like Stu Curry.
No, I know exactly. I just remember who it was, and it wasn't him.
Okay.
It was like the antithesis to him.
Okay.
Who could you think of that was on the exact opposite end of the scale to him, who's very, very well known? And their Instagram handle starts with SU.
Are we like? Are we naming these people or?
You can mouth it.
I don't know if I want to publicly.
You know who it is. Anyway.
I don't want to get sued.
So, it's public information. We can talk about it. So what do you want to do when we talk about core then?
So I think there's like three main components that we kind of want to look at for like actual effective core training. I think the first pillar that we're going to kind of look for is like anti-flexion extension.
Mm-hmm.
Again, because of the nature of the core stuff, like I don't really feel like it's overly isolated stuff. I feel like a lot of it is kind of integrated. Yep. So as far as like anti-flexion extension things that I do like for like anti-flexion, I quite like a plank.
Mm-hmm.
Just like a normal prone plank. And then for like anti-extension, I quite like a counterbalance squat.
Mm-hmm.
Again, holding a weight out in front of you really teaches a nice compact rib pelvic position. And then obviously depending on which pattern that you're priming yourself for, you can kind of change it, whether it's like a counterbalance squat or whether it's like a Zercher good morning or something like that. Something that's going to be anterior loaded, teach you how to hold the rib pelvis position, and then move through that range that you're about to do. They're probably like my favorite go-tos.
Yep. I actually have a third one to add as well that I quite like, which is definitely much more integrated, but it's primarily like some use for hamstring things. But it's definitely got some anti-flexion qualities to it, would be a Bosch hold.
A Bosch hold?
Yeah, on a GHD.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, so you know how like almost like a bottom of a GHD, but knees slightly bent, so you've got tension on hamstrings.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then you've got the like anti-flexion part of the holding the core as well. Thumbs up for that one. I quite
Fuck
like
yeah.
that, and I use that quite a bit. I've actually used it quite a bit with Nathan this prep,
Mm-hmm.
who is coming back from an ACL surgery,
Yep.
and he had the hamstring graft ACL replacement.
Mm-hmm.
So there was, quite a bit of weakness in that hamstring, obviously, because a portion was cut out of it.
Yep.
So yeah, I've had those in there for a little while for him, just to really just build a little bit of resilience through that in an isometric way prior to loading anything. And then we also get the core work in there as well.
Yeah, nice.
It's worked really well.
Happy days.
Yeah.
So on
And
that
then we're
one,
going to look.
so just one more to add into that one there. For like anti-flexion extension, GHD sit-ups.
Yeah.
Like, again, you can change.
But GHD sit-ups with your feet in the, like where your feet are supposed to go, like on the thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
So
they're pretty
feet
much like
in the
in the
stirrups.
stirrups kind of thing. And then like as you obviously lower down, bring it into a little bit of compression here for anti-extension. And then
Yep.
obviously you can load that in a bunch of different ways to challenge it even more. That's always a favorite of mine to really double
Yep.
down on.
I actually really like that a lot. They're so hard though. You know what?
Yeah.
I've actually been doing almost the opposite of that at the end of today's day one session. Actually, is GHD sit ups, but with my feet down on the platform
Yep.
on the ground, my knees under the pads. So then my lower back, or like kind of like my upper hip, lower back is on the pads,
Yep.
and then actually going into flexion extension. Juicy as.
Delightful.
It's kind of like it's almost the opposite of what you would normally do for a GHD sit up.
Yeah, but there can also be like some real merit and validity in doing the opposite of something.
Yeah, I just thought it was interesting, and I'm really enjoying it. Cool. So then anti-lateral flexion would be the next one that we'll want to look at in that chain.
Yeah, so I think if we're looking at that from a nice introductory phase, I would be looking at something as simple as like a side plank.
Very simple.
Yeah, but then if we're looking at being able to make it a little bit more integrated and appropriate, something like a single arm farmer's carry is going to be magic.
Yep. Yeah, I'm a big fan of the farmer's carries also.
Yeah.
Copenhagen planks would be another really good one too, as a progression to that.
I quite like that, obviously, for the like sort of how it addresses that sort of like anterior fascial sling, sort of go like integrating the adductors into the external obliques, and how that all sort of like ties together. I think that's a really nice addition to that sequence.
Yep. I like to pretty much start those with at the knee though, and then
100%.
progressively move out.
Yeah,
Because they're
like
pretty brutal.
yeah, and then obviously like start top leg with the knee, bottom leg on the ground. Like the good thing is with a Copenhagen plank, there are so many progressions, regressions that you can do to make it as easy or as hard as you possibly need to. But I think with a lot of things, people go, I don't want to start at ground zero. Like I want to start at least like, step 3 or 4 out of 10. And I want to be, part of the way there. But I feel like a lot of people, if they go, you know what, I do have to start at 1. I feel like if they can kind of check the ego a little bit and go, well, I just need to do whatever the hell I need to do to facilitate these adaptations that I'm chasing. I feel like so many people would be like, shit, I would say that I'm, decently strong through my lower body. I still quite often will do Copenhagen's off my knee.
Yeah, I have to on my bad leg
Yeah.
because that adductor is still super jacked up from when I tore it. It's not even close to recovered yet.
Yeah, that's because you tore your fucking adductor.
I know. Trust me, I was there.
Jesus
Um,
Christ.
Speaking of me, do you know what I have in my program on lower day 2 that I think you're going to froth?
What?
B stance, safety squat bar, RDLs, 2, um, 2, what do you call them? Pins.
Mwah. I really built that one up.
It's going to be nice though, huh?
Yeah, I just love any sort of like good morning variation to pins.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's just
Pretty excited to do that one actually.
yeah. Like I did some B stance good mornings a little while ago, and I'm like, God, I feel uncoordinated as fuck with them. But I'm also like, that's why I really like them because they are obviously addressing a fairly significant movement discrepancy.
Yeah, because I was doing those the landmine B stance RDLs,
Mm.
and I got to the point where I had it loaded with 60 kilos, and
Yeah,
there's only bumper plates at the new gym, so there was not enough room for me to grab the end of the bar. And I
nice.
was like, what would be a sexy progression from this?
Yeah,
That's what I came up with, so I'm pretty excited to do that.
nice.
Yeah, cool. And then probably the last, just a caveat on that, those single arm farmers carries would be my favorite for the anti-lateral flexion to kind of integrate everything.
I think so as well. Like it's so I quite often will program in those as well. And I literally always have to tell people, I'm like, the objective of this is anti-lateral flexion. So I'm like, if it's pulling you down here, I don't want you walking along like this. Like I want you to be able to actually like especially like when I like program these for like other coaches, I'm like, I actually want you to be able to like stand upright and
Stand
nice
up.
and tall and be using enough load that it's trying to pull you down, but you're able to resist against it so that you don't get pulled into the positions we're trying to avoid.
Yeah, it's not a matter of going as heavy as you can drag along the ground.
Yeah, it's like,
I see that all the time.
but I just laugh
And
like,
then,
sorry, go on.
no, I love to.
Yeah,
So the last part of the core would be anti-rotation.
yeah. Now, my introduction to this is a little bit controversial.
Say it.
Oh, I feel so dirty saying it.
Say it.
Like, okay.
If you're gonna say what I think you're gonna say, go back and reference my Instagram post from 2 days ago
Oh,
or yesterday. I
you
think
know
it was
exactly
yesterday.
where I'm fucking going with this. But I think this is kind of the caveat to like base level introduction. And that's how I'm going to like preface the fuck out of this. Sorry, I feel like I'm going to be sick by saying this. Fine.
Say it. I'm gonna bully you forever.
It's a cat dog. It's a bird dog. Fuck. Okay.
Oh, Cat Dog. That was a great cartoon as well.
Such a good cartoon. I'm glad you got the reference on that. But again, I am going to preface the whole bird dog thing. If you can squat 300 kilos and you think that a bird dog is an appropriate exercise for you, that is a virtual slap across the face.
Yeah.
Again, this is where like I'm kind of going from. I've just started working out of a commercial gym where I've got a lot of people that have never been to a gym before or are very new to it. For them, a bird dog is probably going to be a really relatively appropriate exercise selection. For you and I, it's probably redundant.
Of course.
And this is where, again, if we're looking from a progression standpoint and a scale of the sort of like anti-rotation drills that we are looking for, if bird dog is like the most rudimentary entry level thing that we can give someone, one of Nick's all time favorite exercises is probably the most progressed relative thing for any strength athlete that has any sort of like significant strength levels. And Nick, the $1 million question is, what do we use as our most favorite anti-rotation exercise? Do you want to call
The
a friend?
greatest move? No, because I
Do
know
you want
what
to go
it is.
50-50?
No, I don't need to.
For the $1 million question, your answer is
The greatest movement of all time, bar none, single arm dumbbell row.
ding, 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 ding. You just won $1 million.
And if you can load that with any meaningful load, anything below that's probably not going to get the job done.
Yeah,
If you're doing it correctly, that is.
correct.
Yeah,
And that's
as
always
a caveat, just like
yeah.
with everything. Yeah, is if you're doing it correctly, that's going to train anti-rotation better than really anything else on there. I think kind of a nice middle ground would be like I really like a plate pull through plank.
Mm-hmm. In like a high plank position.
Yeah, a high plank position.
Mm-hmm.
Have like a dumbbell or a plate kind of outside your left arm, say,
Mm-hmm.
and then you reach through with your right arm and drag it through to outside of your right arm, and then place your right arm back down on the ground, reach through with your left arm, drag it back through to the other side.
Yeah. So again, like I like a variation that's kind of similar to that, which is like a renegade row, but not with like the push up and shit. It's like if you're in a high plank position holding a pair of dumbbells, body's in a nice straight line, glutes are flexed, pelvis is in a nice stable position, then as you row that dumbbell up and you've got one less point of contact, your body's ability to resist the desire to want to rotate really heavily to compensate for that. So again, the few times that I have kind of like hurt my back, that's kind of been like my entry level anti-rotation thing, like a bird dog. Even when I am coming back from a back injury, a bird dog still isn't really challenging or appropriate enough. Whereas like I can do a renegade row using like 5 kilo dumbbells. It's like cool, that they're not heavy, but the anti-rotation that it puts me in is like, oh, that's like really challenging. And then that's really nice.
Yeah.
And then as I progress to a point where it's like, oh, I can do these pretty comfortably, that's when it's like, okay, again, when we sort of like talk like gatekeeper exercises, like I get to a point where I'm like, yeah, I can probably start doing single arm rows again, because that's going to have better carryover to so many qualities that any other drill won't do.
Yep, exactly. I like it. And so it's just about picking appropriate movements to kind of where you're at and the adaptations that we're trying to look to train or train towards. That's kind of going to come together at the end here, where we help you guys build some warm-ups for the level that you're at. Cool. So that's kind of like the main three things that we're going to look at, right? When we're building a warm-up is like shoulders and everything that's involved with that, hips, everything that's involved in that, and then core and kind of everything that's involved in that. That's probably like the three main like overarching kind of things that we're going to look at outside of any specific cases that may have injuries that we need to work around, etc. But like as a general principle, they're going to be the three main areas that we look at.
Yeah.
So then let's move into some of the things that we see people do incorrectly during their warm-ups, or maybe not necessarily incorrect, but things that we think there's potentially better options for. If we can name a few, I think what we might be able to do is then present some better options.
Yeah.
To people.
Can I start off with another controversial
Yeah, you
statement?
can do whatever you like, man. This is your podcast.
So again, like I think I kind of touched on it a little bit just before, and again, it's not necessarily something that they're doing incorrectly, but I think it's kind of where it's misdirected effort. And that is if you are a strength athlete or a powerlifter or anyone of like relatively decent levels of strength and you're still doing any sort of big three, regardless of who has a name in front of it, I think it's just kind of like pissing in the wind.
Mm-hmm.
Again, I think we've spoken enough about the scale that these things exist on
Mm-hmm.
that we can kind of look at it and go, well, okay, cool. Like, again, if we're getting a 45-year-old mum in of like two kids that's like never been to the gym before, it's like, yeah, running her through like, you know, a bird dog and a curl up and a side plank is probably going to be pretty challenging. But if
Mm-hmm.
you're someone that can squat 300 plus kilos and that is like an appropriate level of challenge, like there's probably some big like rocks and some missing pictures there that probably need to be addressed if you want to be able to continue squatting those sorts of numbers with any sort of longevity whatsoever. So again, I think this is kind of like, it's not that they're wrong. I just think it's misdirected energy. I think we would be better off looking at things like, you know, a walking lunge to a sprinter's pose as a primer for legs when you're getting ready to squat. I think we would be better off looking at a single arm farmer carry if we're looking at anything sort of like, you know, anti-lateral flexion. And I think if we're looking at anything sort of like rotationally as well, like do some rows, like do a single arm dumbbell row. And if you're able to integrate those into a nicely structured warm up, which is obviously something we're going to talk about in a little bit as well, you're probably going to find that the body adapts better to a more relative stimulus. And then that's going to, A, give you better longevity for squatting bigger weights. And it's probably going to allow you to squat bigger weights.
Mm-hmm.
That's
Yeah,
probably
and
where I would start off with it.
yeah, I agree. So it's like those packaged and well marketed warm up kind of routines that are X big three, Y big three, whatever they may be, are not, they're not poorly designed. They're well designed,
Yep.
but they're
Entry
movements
level.
picked from the entry level of each kind of plane of movement that we want to work on and just kind of plugged in. And at some point, we want to progress beyond that. I think that's literally what I might have even wrote in my post the other day that you shared is like your progression shouldn't just be saved for your main movements. We want to be able to progress everything that we're doing in the gym because that's how we drive meaningful adaptation. So if you can do, if you can resist more than gravity, you probably don't need to be doing these really entry level stuff.
Yeah. And I think this is like sort of coming back to the point, like this isn't for me to be like facetious or anything like that. It's literally for me to go, I don't like seeing people waste their time. Like I know guys
Yeah.
that deadlift 300 plus, they squat, you know, high 200s in sleeves, they bench, you know, 160 to 180. Like they're fucking strong, but then they're off doing stuff that I'm like, how is this applicable to being actually supportive of you lifting, like benching 180 kilos and doing a bloody prone flappy bird? Like, I'm sorry, that doesn't add up.
No. And it takes so much time at the start of your workout. And like I've literally had people say like, "Oh, I'm sorry, like I'm gonna have to stop training like a powerlifter because I can't do this 45-minute warm up. I just don't have time." And I'm like, "Well, you don't have to do it. That's the cool part."
Yeah, and I think this is
Yeah.
obviously like where we're eventually going to kind of like tie everything in really nice. Is like a warm up shouldn't have to take you 45 minutes. Like
Yep.
it could literally take 3.
It could take 0. Yeah, and that's kind of where we want to get to. So, hey, one of the big ones that I see, and it's been like it's not really a pet peeve. Well, no, it is. It is a pet peeve of mine. It's a gym pet peeve.
Mm-hmm.
Is the arms down by the side, elbows bent, dumbbells in your hands, and you just kind of like rotate them outwards. to warm up your shoulders.
Yeah, amazing.
You see that? I see that a lot in commercial gyms.
Dude, I see that even in non-commercial gyms.
Yeah, okay. I haven't seen it for a little while. Actually, I lie. I saw it the other day at the new gym, but I didn't see it at the gym that I work at for a while.
Do you want to explain why it's an inefficient movement?
Yeah, so if you're holding dumbbells, the way dumbbells work is they are a weight that gravity acts upon and pulls towards the ground. Okay, that's how they weigh something. So if you're holding the dumbbells in your hand at 90 degrees, you're doing an isometric bicep curl. Okay, because you're holding that dumbbell off the ground with your bicep.
Mm-hmm.
You can imagine that gravity's pulling the dumbbell towards the ground. You're resisting gravity with your bicep. And then from there, you're keeping your bicep in that position. And now you're just moving your arms externally against zero load. So regardless of the weight of the dumbbell that I'm holding, I can still do this movement with the exact same load on the muscles that externally rotate my shoulder. Because the load is in my bicep.
Amazing.
Does that explain it well?
Yeah.
And this isn't actually a bad movement if you place the load in the right direction. So if
Bingo.
there's better ways to do it, but if you want to do this, you could just grab a cable, right? So if we think about how we want to apply force, if we're externally rotating this way, that's externally rotating here, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the force has to be directly opposite those fibers. So if we hold a handle here and pull the load that way, and the cable's coming this way, that then is applying force to these muscles right here in the direct opposite action to what we're doing.
Mm.
And that would then be fairly effective at that.
Delightful.
So just don't do that because it really bothers me.
Can I talk about something else that really bothers me?
Please.
Do you want me to go with an upper body or a lower body one?
You can choose your favorite.
Shadow boxing with dumbbells.
Oh, dude.
Like, I can't even begin to tell you. Like if I see someone shadow boxing with dumbbells, like I genuinely want to go up and fight them.
That's so bad.
Like,
I wouldn't though.
I've never been in a fist fight before, but if someone was shadow boxing in the gym, I'm like, that feels like the first person. I'm like, yep, like let's fucking go. Keep the dumbbells up.
Okay, so do you want to talk about? Let's break that down. That might be fun because I'm in a fairly autistic mood, and like I feel like we've gone pretty deep, but we could.
You say that like you're not normally.
I know. There's no switch.
Let's go. Let's go.
So someone's shadow boxing in the gym.
Mm.
What are they actually achieving?
Giving you a bit of the us.
A bit of the us. I feel like they're doing some of the stuff that we said right at the start with the shoulder stuff.
So,
but just not well.
Like very poorly.
Yeah.
Like
if they're like doing this,
they're doing like protraction, internal rotation. It's like, theoretically, it's things we need to be able to do to produce good amounts of force.
Yeah.
But why the fuck do you need to do shadow boxing using dumbbells?
Because it looks badass, man.
Not when you're using like the pink 1 kilo dumbbells.
No,
like
that doesn't look
that
good.
just makes you look like a fucking idiot.
Yeah, I don't like that. All right, I've got another one, last one, and then we'll build some warm ups.
Sweet.
So banded clamshells.
Yeah. Gross.
Banded clamshells.
Why don't you like them?
Well, one, they're really irrelevant. So even worse is clamshells without a band, which I know is advocated for as well. So what are we working when we do a clamshell of any kind?
We're training the glutes, though.
Yeah, you're training the action of glute med, right? Which is external rotation of the hip.
Yeah, because that's how I'm going to build a nice, big, juicy peach. I want a voluptuous ass. Surely that's the best way to. But all the booty girls on Instagram do it.
They do, but they don't need to. Do you know the crazy thing is when
I love when you're in these moods.
When I first started training Em, she did all of this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Not when I first met her, right? Because she was kind of following a bunch of the people that advocate for a lot of this stuff. A lot of the girls on Instagram that do this stuff, that compete, and that was what she was doing, was competing as well. And I mean, she has a great physique for it, and she's had a great physique for it at the time, but it wasn't because of the things that she was doing, like banded clamshells and 45-degree kickbacks. It was in spite of it. And I am actually putting together a post on this exact topic.
Amazing.
It's something that I've wanted to do for a while, but I didn't really want to do because it was Em, but she was actually the one that brought it up a week ago. And I was like, oh, well, if you don't mind, I might actually do that because I think it's really useful for a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I started training her, I just literally took out all of that stuff. I was like, you're not doing kickbacks. You're not doing clams. You're not doing any of that shit. I know that it makes your glutes burn. But that's because your glute med is like this big and you're making it do this. And it's only so much of this that it can do before it starts to burn. And that burning doesn't necessarily mean anything good. It just means that it's contracting and doing what you're asking it to do.
Mm-hmm.
And that doesn't mean you're going to get a huge bikini booty. So we took all of that stuff out. And guess what? Her glutes got bigger.
Blasphemy.
Crazy, right? So, obviously if we look at it from a biomechanics standpoint, is the primary function of the glute med is the lateral hip stabilizer. So if you're walking into the gym without your hip like exploding out the side of your body, you're probably utilizing your glute med a lot more than what you will in any type of clamshell.
But Nick, what if my glutes aren't on?
They're on. Trust me. They are.
But what if they're not?
If they're not, then you're not in the gym.
You're not standing up. You're not walking in.
You're not walking in. But I like a really nice way to train this. If you like want to really go down this route of like I have to warm up, is that walking lunge, sprinter pose, single leg RDL, which we'll get into in a minute. But that literally ticks all the boxes, much better than any like clamshell, banded clamshell, anything like that will.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it's super interesting, and it does kind of bother me because I feel like so many of these women specifically have just been fed so much fucking garbage in relation to this is how you grow a booty. And obviously that's what, a big portion of gym girls train for these days is like, I want a big booty, I want cap delts. Like, you can have those things. You don't need to do these fucking ridiculous things to get them.
So if you
If
want to know a
just train
funny
properly,
story,
it's going to happen.
the other week when I posted up the video of me doing those like RDLs with the 80s,
Yeah.
I had more comments. I mean, like, there was a couple of guys that were just like, dude, like, you know exactly what you're doing here. I'm like, of course.
Yeah.
But the amount of girls that are just like, your glutes are ridiculous. I'm like,
because
yes.
I train properly.
It's like, yes. And I hinge and squat like an absolute animal. And I don't do any of this pussy farting around with stupid band shit.
Yeah. Yeah, and look, a lot of these girls are super strong too. And
Yeah.
they can like RDL good amounts of weight. They can, Bulgarian split squat a ton of weight. If you're doing that, trust me, the clamshells aren't doing shit other than making it feel like they are because it's burning.
Yeah.
It's not actually doing anything at all. And like, dude, like I'll use Em as a perfect example. She can Bulgarian split squat with like 35 kilos, 35 kilo dumbbell, contralaterally loaded, and do it perfectly for a good set of like 10 to 12.
Yeah, which is fucking insane.
That's strong. She's not getting anything out of a clamshell. Nothing. Which is why we don't do them anymore. Okay, guys, we've literally thrown an hour and a bit's worth of complete nerd terms at you. I feel like we've done a decent job at explaining why we like certain things and kind of what we're trying to achieve with them. But I know at this point, you're probably all thinking, fuck, this warm-up is going to take me 2 hours. It's not. So do you want to kind of move into now how you would kind of put that together for an entry-level warm-up? So say the new gym that you're working in,
Yep.
someone comes in and they're like, I'm pretty new to training. How would a warm-up look for them?
Cool. So again, you and I both see sort of like eye to eye on this stuff in that we like to work with integrated warm-ups. So again, if we're talking to someone who's really entry level and we're looking at a lower body session, there would generally be 5 things that we're going to do, like inclusive of like the thing that we're going to do. So imagine like if let's say we're going to do a safety bar squat and that's the entry level movement that we're working on with this person, we would start with something like single leg hip extension prone. We would do that for however many reps we need to do. We would then probably integrate something like the McGill Big 3 to help train like awareness and stability from a more like medial perspective. Again, work like starting close working out. So we would probably go like single leg hip extension into something like a curl up, into a side plank, the movement that shall not be named, the bird dog. And then we would go and do the thing, which in this instance, for example, is a safety bar squat. Now, depending on how new they are, they would potentially do this with every single warm-up set all the way until they do their top sets, potentially even in between their top sets if they really need a lot of TLC. If someone is, say, in their first 12 months of training, they kind of have a bit of an idea of like, oh, yeah, but I know when things feel good and I know when they don't feel so good. We would kind of use like the thing as like you might go in and just do like an empty bar. And if you're like, yeah, it feels okay, but not amazing. It's like, cool. A1, A2, A3, A4, do the thing again. Yeah, that feels really good. It's like, cool, go train. Like, we don't have to say you have to do 16 rounds, time 30-second intervals on each one. It's like, cool. We want to do as little as possible to get you ready to do the thing that we're here to do.
Exactly.
And that's how I would structure someone's program, even if they were quite new and entry level.
And so that would be like your lower day. And then say for an upper day, we might do something like taking that same principle of the integrated warm up with, say, like A5 being like the actual movement. We might do something like A1 being the foam roller thoracic extension. A2 might be thread the needle. A3 might be, I hate that thing. A3 might be like a wall slide, and then A4 might be like a cable pullover, and then A5, a pressing movement.
Yeah.
Bench press, for example. Same thing. If you go roll through that, feels good, cool. Just like crack on with your bench presses. If you do your first set of bench press as your like first A5, and you're like, that really didn't feel that good, still feeling a little bit stiff, or like I don't have a whole lot of stability that I might like. Can't really get into the position that I like. Go back A1, roll through again, and just kind of keep rolling. When you get back to A5, add a plate as your second warm up, and kind of continue from there.
Yeah.
Now that's four warm up movements integrated into the actual movement that you want to be training for the day, as like a A1 to 5. How would we then look to that? Now that's going to be entry level.
I would say like entry to like almost like intermediate.
Yeah. So then once you get to a point where you feel pretty comfortable with those things, and you need to probably look to progress past those things, they're not really giving you much stimulus or adaptation anymore. How would you then look to progress your lower day warm-up from there?
So I would start to make again, it's still looking like the integrated warm-up thing, but this, instead of going like A1, 2, 3, 4, 5, it might be like A1, 2, 3. And the movements that we do prior to the main thing would become slightly more complex and slightly more system orientated rather than isolated. So I would probably be looking at something like a walking lunge with a sprinter's pose after each lunge. So obviously like do a lunge, come up into sprinter's pose, which again, sprinter's pose is pretty much where you look like a flamingo. Like you're on one leg, flexing the quad, flexing the glute. The other leg that's up off the ground is up in a position of hip flexion that you would look like kind of if you were sprinting. And that would kind of be like the A1 drill. And then the A2 drill would be like a single leg RDL paired with kind of like a hip airplane. So again, taking the hip through flexion, like abduction, a bit of external rotation, all that sort of stuff. Pretty much like scouring the inside of the pelvis with the head of the femur in as many directions as possible. And then coming back up into, obviously, like hip extension back to a standing position, and then alternating the legs there. And then that would be the same concept of like, cool, now you get under the bar, you do the thing. Does it feel good? No. Okay, we probably need to do another round of that. Try it again. Yep. Okay, it's feeling a little bit better, but still not amazing. Cool. Like you keep doing it. Yep. We're second warm up. Yep. Okay, it's feeling a whole lot better now. It feels like it should. Cool. They don't need to happen anymore.
Yep. I love that. That's the exact lower body warm up that I do at the moment.
It's because it's fucking king.
Yeah, and my actual first movement of the day is walking lunges. So it's really nice because I do that walking lunge with the sprinter pose, and then I do the single leg RDL hip airplane. And if I do 1 to 2 sets of that, I don't have to do any extra warm-up sets for my walking lunges. I literally just went and grabbed the 38 kilo kettlebells, and I was like straight into it. That was my top set straight away.
Yeah. Awesome.
Super time efficient. So I literally, like this morning, I was doing my top set of walking lunges within 8 minutes of being in the gym.
Perfect.
And that was heavy. Like that 38 kilos kettlebells. That's pretty heavy for a set of walking lunges for me at the moment.
Yeah.
So I was like, oh, this is nice. Like I'm into it.
Nice.
So for the upper body day, I'll probably roll with the same format of A1, A2, and then A3 being the thing. So as Ben said, we've now condensed a bunch of those more isolated actions that we were talking about earlier into a more integrated fashion where we're training multiple um, what's the word for that? Multiple properties all at once, or multiple movements all at once. So I might look at something like a chest supported incline dumbbell row and a dumbbell Z press, and then the A3 would be the thing. And that's a warm up that I stole exactly from Ben's Instagram.
Yeah. Like, again, if we are thinking of like powerlifters specifically, it might, instead of being a Z press, like it might just be like a high, like a 75-degree incline shoulder press. If you don't have the upper back and scapular like stability and range to be able to get the dumbbells overhead in a way that's actually creating something meaningful. But again, if you can't do that, then you probably shouldn't be at this stage. You should probably be on the regressed version, improving the range of motion.
And work towards that.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that would take some ego soloing, and if you're not at the point where you're able to do that yet, you could just regress the movement to that incline press, but I would also suggest not doing so.
Yeah.
Take some time. Do it right.
Yeah, but I mean, like, that's a warm-up that I've been using for a lot of my upper body training lately. And again, there are still days and there are still periods of time where it's like, for whatever reason, like external things are going on around me where it's like, yeah, cool, like my upper body feels a little bit like beat up and I might need to regress it to the more like basic thing and go through that pattern. But again, it might be 1 or 2 rounds and I'm back off, doing the things that I do. Yeah. If I'm coming in, I'm like, yeah, cool, like things feel really good. I might just do the more integrated, like series. It's like 3 instead of 5. It's like, cool. If I can do that and then I can go and do the thing, it's like, cool. I know my upper back and my shoulders are going to be feeling pretty good. And then I can go and actually do the thing properly.
Yeah. I think a really cool point to bring up here for people is as you're listening to this or watching this, you'll notice that in this level of warm-up, this first progression is these movements that we're giving you as warm-ups are actual exercises. They're not like random, super isolated, broken down portions of a movement. Like it's a walking lunge with a sprinter pose, a single leg RDL with a hip airplane, a chest supported dumbbell row and a dumbbell Z press or an inclined dumbbell press. These are actual loadable exercises that train multiple qualities and functions all at once. I think that's a really big distinction to make is if your warm-up doesn't look like a warm-up, you're probably on the right track.
Yeah. And this is where even if someone is coming back from like say rehab or whatever it is, it's like training should be rehab and rehab should be training. Like they should be feeding into each other. So like if you are at a point where the things that you're doing for a warm-up just look like you're training, yeah, like you're probably in the realms of like, yeah, you're probably onto it.
You're on the right track. So the last progression that we would then look at would be beyond, it would probably be like the final progression of what a warm-up might look like, and how would that go?
So this is where we would probably just bring it down to like an A1, and that's where you just walk into the gym and do the thing.
Yep.
Like best case scenario, like again, you and I talk about this a lot. There are days when you just walk into the gym and you're like, you know what? I feel fucking shit hot today. We're going to the races. And you just put like weight on the bar and it's like, yep, cool. It feels great. You just keep warming up. You don't need to go off and do the other things because your body is like, yeah, like we know what we're doing. Like this is why we've been doing all the things that we've been doing over the last few weeks, few months, few years. It's like, it's to get me ready for this thing. Again, there may be times when you kind of have to backtrack a little bit through the things that you have done previously to like just reinforce where you're at. But in an ideal world, and I think this is something that has really started to like become apparent and applicable for me, like not being in a powerlifting prep, it's like, yeah, like I don't need to spend 30, 40 minutes warming up for my top set of squats. Like I can literally walk in and go, cool, I can do like one or two sort of like exercises and be like, cool, like does my body feel good? Well, yeah, it does. Like, okay, well, I'm just going to train.
Yep.
Like eventually,
this is a dynamic system as well, right? So, and it has a lot of moving parts. So you might say you're a powerlifter in a position that Ben's in at the moment where you haven't competed for a while, you don't have a competition in sight, and everything's feeling good, your body's moving really well. You might be able to go in more often than not and just start with that exercise for the day because you've laid the groundwork to get to that position. Say you start a prep, and the nature of a prep is that things become a lot more specific, a lot more repetitive, and a lot more loaded. It might get to the stage where you're halfway through your prep and you don't feel as good as what you did at the start. But instead of going in and doing 40 minutes of random isolated drills, we can then just take maybe one step back in the progression scheme that we've laid out today. And instead of just going in and squatting, go in and do a set of walking lunges and some single leg RDLs and then squat. And I feel like that would be like a nice way to regress back. I'm not feeling so good at the moment. I'm a bit beat up. I won't just go straight back to start. I'll just kind of take one step back. All right, now I feel good again. Now I'm good to here. It's not going back to step one all of the time.
Yeah.
Cool. I think probably I would like to mention on that one as well. I'm a little bit older than you and a little bit more beat up than you for various reasons. So the amount of days that I can just go in and just start training are fairly few and far in between. But what I have been able to get myself in a position to do is, instead of this final progression for me, just with like the position that I'm in at the moment, being go in and just do A1 as a thing, I might just do like A1 as one movement that kind of gets me going, and then make my main movement my B series.
Yeah.
So if I'm doing a squat day, I might go in and I'll be like, my A series is lunges. I'll train that as an exercise. My B series is squats.
Yeah.
And that kind of puts me in a really nice position to be moving a little bit better before I get to squats.
Yeah. And I think this is kind of where we, like, if we can look at things through the lens of what can I do today, not what should I be able to do today. I think that, you know, because again, there are times when like I go into the gym, I'm like, yeah, like I'm going to the gym, like the body feels pretty good. And it's like the moment my hand touches that barbell, it's either like, or like, I'm pretty fortunate. Like for a lot of my bench stuff at the moment, like I get on the bench, I'm like, cool. My thoracic doesn't feel jacked up. My shoulders feel like they're moving nice and freely. It's like I'm good to bench. Whereas anytime I go into a squat session at the moment, it's like I have to spend time actually doing these drills. Deadlifts are a bit hit and miss at the moment, but like there are days when I can go in and I can do an upper body session with zero warm up. I can literally go in, I can get under an empty bar and go, yep, cool, I feel good. I can chuck a plate on. Yep, that feels good. I can go to the next warm up. Yep, that feels good. Next warm up feels good. Yep, and I get through my whole session of bench work. I'm like, cool, that all felt great. And I didn't have to do a single thing to prepare for it other than show up and do the thing. Yep. Whereas at the moment with my squats, it's like, oh no, like there's a bit of work I have to do to get my joints feeling like they can handle what they're being put through. again, it's not a matter of like, am I strong enough to do the thing? It's like, I want things to feel
Feel good.
seamless. Like I don't want to be sitting
Yep.
there going, I'm fighting for position and I'm fighting against what my brain is screaming, going, hey, we don't like this for whatever reason. Like I want to be able to go, yeah, like I'll cruise through this and I'll hit my positions and then I'll just push hard and I'll stand back up. Like,
Yeah, and that's a
and
little bit of a return from injury thing as well. That's very common with that like neurological adaptation of the body trying to like fight against going back into that same position.
yeah, but I think as well, like getting to a point where like you're either in like a really long off season or just going through some more just general training, being able to utilize, so for example, like my training at the moment is like for squats in particular, it's like a top set of three for a little bit of skill and a little bit of strength within that pattern. And then I take myself over to the hack squat and I load it up and
Yeah,
I will train that really hard. So I get
yeah,
my skill component of the barbell squat, which is still, holds value for me. Like I like to be strong in a squat pattern,
yeah.
but then I'm going to go take myself over to something like a hack squat where I can chuck a good amount of weight on there and I can train my legs hard so that it's like, yeah, cool. My legs haven't forgotten how to push hard through that pattern. But while my body readapts to positions and skill of this, it's like the legs have the strength. It's now just waiting on
Still
this to
getting
come
that.
to the party a little bit more.
Yeah, yeah, I love it. I think we got one question
Mm-hmm.
about warm up specifically, which I'm going to ditch the other questions until next week.
Mm-hmm.
But the question that we got about warm ups was a warm up for shoulder stability,
Mm-hmm.
and I think we covered a lot of stability stuff earlier. But did you want to kind of outline some things to think about with a say quote unquote unstable shoulder and how you could address that in your pre-training work?
So I think we kind of touched on this really briefly. It's like it's kind of boils down to like what part of the shoulder is actually causing the issue. Like, is it that the
Yeah,
glenohumeral joint is actually just not doing its job properly? Is it the AC joint? Is it that the scapular thoracic joint isn't oscillating the way that we kind of need it to? Um, but I think as well, the important part is if we are looking at any sort of stability around the shoulder, like the warm up needs to be relative to challenging the stability of the shoulder. So, for example, like I know we spoke a little bit about like a bottoms under press. Like that is going to
mm-hmm.
be a movement that is probably going to have to play a really valuable part at some point in time because the nature of that movement challenges stability greatly. So
Yeah,
I think if we are, and I think this is where we obviously have to look at joints and whether the joints need to be stable, whether they need to be mobile, or what the joint needs to do. And that's kind of how we have to then go and structure a lot of our warm ups specifically for that in terms of, do I need to do like, again, the whole thing is like, I need to strengthen my rotator cuff. The
yeah. That's
language
the one
there
that we
doesn't make
hear.
sense. Like the
Yeah, that's
rotator
the
cuff
one.
isn't going
That's
to
the
be
one we hear a lot.
strong. Yeah, like we need to be able to give it something where it actually has to tie into what that area does. You know, we're not going to be going off and doing 3 RM external rotations. Like I'm probably going to want to give me something a little bit more unstable where the shoulder actually has to do what it's designed to do, and that's stabilize.
Yeah,
So I think
yeah. I love
if
it.
we are looking at, you know, warm ups for an unstable shoulder, it's like one, first you kind of have to identify where in the shoulder, because again, people are like, oh, like my shoulder joint. But like it's one of four that it's going to be. And obviously,
Yeah,
like,
three
sternoclavicular joints
primarily.
probably not going to be much of an issue. I'm probably, obviously, like, the good thing is, like, if an AC joint is all fucked up, you're probably going to be able to see through their t shirt. But
Mm-hmm.
that kind of then leads me to a point where it's like, I'm either going to be looking at glenohumeral joint or scapular thoracic joint. which I think we talked enough about relative thoracic mobility in terms of like flexion, extension, rotation. And then I think we also sort of talked enough about like relative like scapular upward rotation, which is going to be linked to like humeral flexion, all that sort of jazz. So I think if we can kind of go, can the shoulder go through full range of motion relative to, how much shoulder flexion we need versus how much upward rotation do we need from the scapula to facilitate being, up overhead. It's like, cool. Do we have access to range there? If we do, it's like we can probably start to challenge some stability in that point there. If it's like, I can get to like here and my arm can't quite get up, it's like, cool, we probably need to assess what the scapula is doing and kind of identify, like, is that the culprit there? Or is it that the glenohumeral joint's actually restricted, which very rarely is the case. It's almost always how the scapula is moving on the rib cage. So again, I think utilizing the framework that we've kind of like set out tonight would well and truly kind of answer that question in terms of, do the relative mobility stuff to get the joints moving how they should, and then do the activation stuff specific to like, what are you actually trying to get doing its job?
Yep. So if I act as a conduit to interpret the words that Ben just vomited onto everyone, I might say something along the lines of, assess if you have access to that overhead position.
Mm-hmm.
If you do, it's probably then going to either be a stability or a strength issue. Identify which one of those it is and then find something to challenge the appropriate one. If you don't have access to the overhead position, it's probably not so much a stability issue as it is gaining access to the position first issue, and then challenging stability and then strengthening once you have that stability.
That's probably the less tismed explanation.
Is that pretty much what you said, but in like one sentence?
Yeah, and probably at like a speed of explanation that's not me running at 1,000,000 miles an hour and be like,
beautiful.
I get carried away.
I know, I do too. At least we're able to understand each other, and then the other one can kind of interpret it as we go.
Yeah, but like, guys, for those of you who don't speak the TISM, this is what he said.
For those of you that are non-neurodivergent.
But like, this is also where like it'd be really interesting to see what percentage of our listener base are coaches and which percentage aren't, because reality being, the coaches should be able to understand what I just said.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, for sure.
And this is something that like I've really taken from like Jordan. It's like, I don't want to simplify things. Like, there are some things where I'm like, yeah, like I can give you a really simplified explanation of what we're talking about and why it's important. Because again, we are going to have people that listen to us that, they're not coaches. They just like to train and they kind of want to have a better understanding of what it is. But if we're getting into the nitty gritty components of mechanics, it's like, I'm going to nerd the fuck out. And I am going to go down a rabbit hole, because for the coaches that are listening that are going to go, hey, I understand what he's talking about. It's like, cool. You should be able to come down this rabbit hole with us, and you should be able to understand it. And if you don't, that's fine. But that probably then highlights you need to do some upskilling.
Yeah, of course. Which that just kind of leads us into a perfect wrap up is, if you are a coach and you're looking for upskilling, if you think that this was in depth, you're in for a massive treat at the Strength Symposium that we're running on April 20th at Apex Strength in Thornton, New South Wales, because warm-ups will be a part of it, and this is pretty surface level compared to some of the stuff that we'll be going into there. Not only will we be explaining it, we'll be showing it to you, having you do it, and then having you explain back to us what you're feeling, what you're doing, and why you're doing it, and maybe some of the solves that you may be able to come up with to fix some of the things that are presenting in those movements. So it should be a really fun day. There's going to be practical and theory elements to pretty much everything that we do. And that's what I'm going to wrap it up on because I think it's super relevant. And that was a fantastic chat, man. I appreciate you having that with me because I do like to be a little bit of a nerd every now and then.
It's fun, man. Like you know me well enough by now that like when you get me on a run where I can go a bit like neurospicy and rant and like go down my rabbit hole, it's like cool. Like I know within the rubs, like you're not going to be sitting there going, I don't understand a single thing he just said. You're gonna be like, it's like, yes, Ben, that's okay. You do what you need to
do. Exactly. I'm just gonna egg it on more than anything.
Exactly.
All right, I'm gonna end it there. Thanks for listening, guys.
Thanks, guys.
Talk to you next week.
See you next week.